Okay, we're going to reconvene to open session, the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. May we have a roll call, please?
President Black?
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray?
Here.
Board Member Blanchard?
Here.
Board Member Clark?
Here.
Board Member Tutane? Here. Student Board Member Athanayak?
Here.
Student Board Member Silwall? Here.
Thank you. For those who wish to participate, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, the reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement.
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. The board took no action in closed session. Before we go any farther, we need to approve the agenda. Does anyone have any changes they want to make to the agenda? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have a school spotlight tonight on Ocean View Elementary.
Thank you, President Black, trustees, and student board members. I am, stand up, you guys are great. I would like to turn this over to Ocean View teachers who will be doing our Ocean View spotlight. We also have Terry Georgeson here, who is our Ocean View principal.
So board members, we've put a worksheet on your desk for you. If you had a chance beforehand to fill it out, great. If you didn't, no big deal. We were just making you work a little extra. My name is Bridget Banyalis.
I'm Izzy Cohen, and we're both fourth grade teachers at Ocean View Elementary.
Could you
Yes.
be sure you talk into the mic?
In the mic, great. We're here to talk to you about how we teach social studies curriculum at Ocean View. Because social studies is a subject with so many narratives to take into account, we've used culture as a common language in order to honor all the different narratives.
Our primary goal, though, is to teach kids to think critically about California history and construct their own interpretations about cultural narratives.
The primary question we consider when planning all of our units is, how does each new group coming to California affect the people and the land, the past and the present?
Recently, we attended a workshop at the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, and they gave us a framework to think about social justice standards through the lens of identity, diversity, justice, and action. And this was kind of a nice comprehensive framework because it validated what we were teaching, but also gave us more form into how we could delineate our units.
So windows and mirrors. This is a framework that's being used more often to build more empathy in our culture and to be more reflective. So every child must first have mirrors to confirm and celebrate their reality.
Then every child needs to have windows to expand their worldviews. And at best, our culture curriculum is both a window and a mirror.
So when we're considering mirrors, those are the individuals. We're looking at the individual. Students are able to identify their own culture, celebrate their identity, and question how their own culture is complex, how it's shaped historically, geographically, and by other cultures.
And windows give us insight into other people's culture and allow us to compare and contrast our own cultural identities to others. What started off as a simple graphic organizer has evolved into the cornerstone of our social studies curriculum. We break culture into 5 spheres: economic, political, social, aesthetic, and belief. And we teach the students that culture is impacted by geography and climate, history, and other cultures. We teach that each culture develops its own shared beliefs and ideas. And before even teaching about other cultures, we investigate what we identify as our own. This is that mirror. We celebrate the culture, the knowledge, the histories that the students bring into the classroom every day. We cultivate cultural pride. Having a framework that's revisited throughout the year allows students to hone their observations, make connections, and form their own opinions about how California culture has been structured and restructured. Through field experiences and reading expository texts, students determine what defines a culture and how that culture came to be. At Ocean View, the diversity of our classrooms and our population promotes this dynamic response to the curriculum. And students are using evidence and experience to justify their findings and of what defines a particular culture.
So, of course, the first thing we had to do to contextualize this for our students was to create our own cultural model. So children brought in photographs, drawings, souvenirs, all sorts of things, and then they placed it in the different domains and had to argue why it fit into certain domains. This also encouraged accountable talk because you might bring an image such as a temple and someone could argue that that goes in belief and someone else might argue that it would go in aesthetic because it's a form of architecture. So it's always bringing a dialogue.
So developing cultural awareness is a process. After examining our own cultures, students are looking to create a fictitious culture modeled after the character Wesley in the children's book Westlandia. Like Wesley, they create a unique culture after considering natural resource, geography, leadership, what beliefs people hold sacred, and how they communicate. So what you see here is the example of the packet that they're working on and crafting, and in the end result is a published culture all their own.
And when students create their own culture, it provides a mirror and also a window, but they connect to this culture. They become intimate with the unique characteristics of their culture. They realize the challenge of sustaining this culture in the face of like fragility of natural resources or political changes or economic changes, and they become very much intrinsically attached to their culture.
So with this attachment, we're able to kind of play on their emotions when we are teaching history. In some years, I've colonized their culture, altered it, and shifted it. And so they understand, they're able to empathize when they're reading about different cultures visiting California and having an impact. And so it's just kind of one of the things we do to kind of get them to feel. So the culture model in action looks messy, and it's interactive, and it generates a lot of discussions. The reason why I like to present it this way is because the students are able to see the connections, and it really helps them have a dialogue. We do sorts where they sort images, they have discussions about why they're placing things where they are, then they start to ask questions about that. This one, they were looking at the similarities and differences between Spanish and Native American cultures, and then they were asked the question, is there evidence of both cultures in California today? And we really got them to the point of asking why. And that's a key part of our teaching, is having the kids notice and then say, but why? And then search for those answers to those questions together.
So one practice that I have in my class is, you saw earlier that social is one of the spheres of our cultural model, and a primary characteristic of social is language. And I wanted to capitalize on the amount of different languages that are spoken in Ocean View, usually maybe 8 to 12 languages per class. And I wanted to give kids an opportunity to take pride in this. And in the past, I was trying to do ways like, oh, you can do the lunch count in your home language or introduce yourself in your home language. But I felt that that was kind of an artificial way of providing a window or mirror because, okay, next week you've forgotten how to count in Thai, and you're not sustaining that understanding. So I instituted a practice called Language of the Week, which I'm going to talk a little bit how it looks day to day. So on Monday morning, I give a presentation, and it consists of a 3-minute video of someone just teaching basic phrases in that language. So in the corner is an example. I try to get a friend to do it or a family member, but if they're not available, there's YouTube. And then I give a presentation on that language, the population of speakers by country, maps, general geography of the language, the evolution of the language, how it was impacted by wars and colonization and trade, the script of the language, and then fun facts. So that's the Monday morning component. And then daily, they greet each other in that language in our morning meeting. So we're staying with one language the whole week. So by the end, they can greet each other in, sometimes we skip weeks, so usually 30 languages. And the most fun part is there's a guest speaker. And oftentimes, it's a parent, this is a grandparent, and they bring in food from their culture, and they talk about traditions and celebrations and how they learn the language and what it means to them. And this is a definite mirror for them to see themselves in the classroom, and it also gives themselves a chance to talk about, to share these skills of speaking another language, which you might not necessarily know about the child in an English-speaking classroom. And it also allows the parents to come into the classroom, and it builds community with them. Oftentimes, parents who aren't comfortable in English, because it's not their first language, will actually come in and share because they can speak in their home language. And the best part is they bring food, so that's really exciting. So the purpose is that language is a great window also into the effects of, as I said, colonization, war, trade, geography, immigration, because you see the effect on the language in tangible ways. You see it in vocabulary, you see it in accents, you see it in body language, you see it in the idiomatic expressions, and this, of course, fits into how does culture affect the people and the land, which is our essential question. And additionally, who is creating the language itself, and then who ultimately writes the cultural narrative?
Culture Days is another way we study culture in fourth grade. It's not appropriation, but it's building empathy and a historical perspective of lived histories. And again, it's built around those essential questions. Each planned Culture Day is crafted so that students can explore hands-on activities, arts, crafts, and music. Using the culture model, they're able to systematically compare the cultural shifts over time. Informed and articulate, these fourth graders take their learning not chapter by isolated chapter. Instead, they learn to synthesize, they learn to infer, and they learn to critique historical events as a composition of factors and influence. Students consider the cost and benefits to each culture. Who gives, who benefits, who contributed to California, and at what cost? Through these questions, students form their own opinions about power structures and systems of inequality.
So the first Culture Day we have is the Acorn Harvest Culture Day, and usually the way we format it is there are 4 fourth grades. Each teacher takes on the teaching of a certain skill or craft or, lesson, activity, and then we rotate the classes around to different stations. So there's usually 4 stations. So Acorn Harvest Day, we had acorn grinding and technique, Chumash rock painting, medicine bags, Iron Chef, where they cook with, they have a cook-off competition with acorn flour. And all the questions, though, and all the activities are grounded in the different social spheres.
Explorer Culture Day is another Culture Day that we celebrate. Again, we're using the essential questions to drive the activities. We used to call it Pirate Day, and because we thought, hey, it's fun, let's everybody dress up as pirates. But as reflective teachers that we are, we asked ourselves the question, what are we really trying to teach? What is the story we need them to go away with? And so the culture of the explorers and the effect of the explorers on California is very, very important. Pirates are part of that. So we do look at pirates. This year, we encourage students to dress up as sailors, and most of them adhered to the instructions. We talk about navigation. We're looking at the economic sphere, medicine at sea, which is really cool. You get to talk about scurvy. Technology, the ropes. Music and dance, really important, is part of the aesthetic sphere. And the spice trade. What did the Europeans value? What were they looking for? What did they bring? And what did they take? Oh, and then yes, pirate democracy is my favorite. We talk about the leadership structure on a ship, and it really throws kids for a loop because pirate ships were actually incredibly democratic. And they always bring that back. Well, like the pirates. And I said, yes, like the pirates. So they learn to flip their perceptions or their perspectives of a culture. And it's great when we can do that.
Gold Rush Day, there aren't as many activities. It's more centered around the play, and so the children are actually inhabiting different roles and historical characters, and then they do a play for the parents. But we also have a flapjack breakfast, poker and betting, and then the main thing is the Gold Rush Fund.
So is this working? Culture days themselves are an evolving cultural model. We're thankful to our groundbreakers, the Albany teachers across the district and across the years who have shaped this. This is not new. This is not ours. We've borrowed. It's really hard for teachers to say, this is mine, because it's not ours. It's everyone's. And we've just looked at it, shifted our angle on it a little bit. Our shifters and shakers are parents who give us feedback. When we're planning these days, I always go out to my parents and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is the way I'm seeing it. What does it look like to you? And they'll give us feedback. And we've changed curriculum based on parent feedback. And participants, the students. The students shape this and encourage us to do different activities and inspire us to do more. As we learn more, the way we teach shifts.
So by viewing history through the lens of culture, we allow this dialogue to emerge with the parents, the students, the teachers, everyone. And we listen, and we are constantly asking, is this working?
So in the past, I know Rancho Day has been a topic of discussion in our district, so I want to address that. And in the past, Rancho Day was enacted by recreating the Rancho era through the lens of Spanish colonialists. The event reflected the carefree life of the Spanish and mestizos, the mestizo ranch owners. And when we asked, is this working, we found it was mostly a singular narrative, that we needed another way to honor the different perspectives.
So today we use the essential questions to ground students in the understanding that when we're holding another culture, we must do so lightly and also with respect. And so we've modified the curriculum, not just Rancho Day, across California to study the social stratification during these periods. But specifically with Rancho Day, students are asked, how did the Rancho era influence California? How are the ranchos able to prosper? And this takes more research, as it's obviously not in the current textbook model. And it also brings up unpleasant histories, oppression, and violence.
So without this dialogue and giving voices a platform, we're not truly teaching history or giving students the tools they require in order to make their own assertions and question the veracity of the sources they're exposed to and given in the future.
So we read, we talk, we listen, we build, and we take action.
And that's the only way we truly learn.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Navin?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. This is actually the most amazing curriculum I've seen in like elementary schools. Like, this is really awesome. I'm very excited about this. I did have 2 questions. One doesn't focus on elementary school so much, but I remember some people mentioning this to me. When you mention different communities that would be marginalized, I guess, or just kind of like smaller communities, how do you involve students without making them feel targeted? And what I mean by that is, like, when you call on a student or try to involve them, like, for a different culture, maybe, like, how do we approach that student? How do you guys, kind of like engage that student without making them feel targeted because of their identity? And I just wanted your take on that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So I do student-led activities in my class, and I kind of promote it as, hey, this is a way of getting your culture out. If you feel like there's something that you need to share, that you have something in your family that's special, something that is part of your identity that's special, bring it to class. And I help them plan a lesson and ask them what they want, what's their teaching objective, and how we roll out the lesson. So one, they learn how to teach what they really want to teach and learn how to do it in a lesson format. That comes from them. And so I'm constantly saying, and guess what? We can do student-led activities for this. And so they start to find those opportunities to jump in. They're allowed to bring family members. They're allowed to get other students involved. So in the past, we've had kids say, hey, I really want to celebrate this part of my culture, and they bring it in.
Perfect. And then my final question, do you mention the slave trade at all when you talk about the European trade across, just on that unit, I know that you guys did that.
Yeah. You want to take that, or you want me to take it? I'll take it. We talk about slavery we don't talk about the slave trade so much. We do touch on it a little bit with Cortez and Cabrillo, because Cabrillo was involved in that. So we do touch on that, but where we really bring it home is when we're talking about the Native Americans and we're having that discussion. Slaves or laborers? What do you think? And the kids, really unpack that. And then we get the experiential learning perspective when they're going to the missions and meeting with Native Americans and asking those questions. What do you think? And so it's alive. Mm-hmm. It's really neat.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really love the posters and the domains and the fictitious culture. I thought it was amazing. So thank you guys so much. I'm very impressed with this curriculum. It's awesome. I'm very excited to see where this goes. Yep.
Charlie?
So this was so great. Thank you. How would you feel about sharing it with a larger audience? I'm thinking about, could we post this PowerPoint, for example, on the district webpage? We won't get your wonderful audio with it, but it would be something. And, I'm just thinking that we do get questions about, what's being taught in 4th grade. And this would be one way to help answer that.
We actually could get the audio with it.
We could actually get the audio, but I think I just wanted to ask how you felt about that.
I think we would probably be open to that. I do think the audio needs to go along with it, because I think some of these slides in isolation could be promoting what we're trying to work against, just the costumes, et cetera, to make sure that there's background that's explaining how we are using that in a systematic way.
And I also want to be really sensitive to the fact that it is something that's evolved. I taught one way. As we have different teachers coming in, the culture shifts and changes, and we want to honor that this is not ours, that this is an evolution that we're part of. I don't know how you can put a disclaimer that says that, but if you can figure out a fancy way of honoring the past and everybody who's created it, yeah.
Good. Ross?
So we formally teach foreign language starting in grade 7, years and years after it is probably best to do so. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on could we introduce more foreign language content, curriculum, training opportunities in or outside the classroom at an earlier age. The second question is on parental involvement. Do you see any impediments that we as the board might want to address? Are there ways to increase parental involvement? I just read a study out of Chicago on sort of intervention at age 3 or so. And long before we see them, the help or the harm is happening in parents who are reading with kids, et cetera. Are there ways that we as the board could address increasing parental involvement from what you've seen?
Is it parental involvement with language or in classroom or with culture?
So language is an issue. Parental involvement in any way is the second.
Well, parental involvement's huge. We can't do this without the parents. That constant dialogue about how do you feel about these questions, how do you feel about the way we're teaching, is part of the magic of the curriculum. They're there. We couldn't teach this without the parents coming in. And they get it. They're like, wow, you really want me to teach? I said, yep. Here's the lesson. And this is the point you're really getting. It's written all over these tables. They need to know this, the answer to this question after this exploration. So parents are involved. And I think Izzy can talk about the language of the week, but we're pulling from our diverse community. We're getting them in. And I've taught at other districts where I had to have food, and I had to stay until 7 o'clock at night to get parents to come in. Teaching in Albany has been this revolutionary experience that you send an email out and you have 10 parents responding right away. So if we're blessed with that, we have to maximize those opportunities. And I think that's what we recognize as teachers. Let's bring them in as much as we can. And knowing that we're going to be criticized by our instruction is open to criticism, and we have to be okay with that. And sometimes I don't like the criticism. I'm stuck in a way, and but I think about it and I soften and I think, well, what's a different angle we can take where we can come to some common ground? Do you want to add?
I guess just with the language, I think that, it would be valuable to teach language earlier on, especially for accent development. And I think there is a lot of interest, as there are a lot of kids who are in after-school programs to learn different languages, and then many parents have their kids in school on Saturday or Sunday to learn the home language or learn how to write in that script. I think language is a great way to teach so many different themes, as we've discussed, and once again, language of the week would not be as effective without the parental involvement. And I think part of the reason so many parents participate is because the kids go home and they're super excited about it. They're like, Mom, please come in and teach this and bring food so my classmates will love me. Not that that's the only way to get acceptance in the classroom, but they get really excited about sharing their talents and also their family's talents. And I had one more thing, but that's all.
Then a follow-up on that. There will be families that cannot as well participate. Single parents or both parents working, et cetera. How has that gone? Has that been okay? Is it works around?
That's fine, because the other option I say is film a video of yourself, email it to me, and I'll play it for the class. And so I do that a lot with when there's someone in the class who doesn't speak the language, because after 10 weeks we're kind of out of languages from my class because I pull from the class. Then I reach out to my friends, and they've sent me videos, and this is the second year I've done this, so I get to reuse those, which is cool.
Lima.
Part of the reason why I've always loved social studies is because I think that learning about history is increasingly important to better ourselves for the future and also for the present. So I really like your presentation and how you guys are touching on that, and my question is, how do you guys sort of involve the current issues, current pop culture in terms of, race and, all of these other issues that revolve around social studies, and how do you tie that into your curriculum?
I'll start. You want to start? I definitely do that through Language of the Week, but I also mostly do that through literature. And we do a big historical fiction unit and also read-alouds and bring that in through literature, because that is a way for kids to build empathy with characters, and then we discuss. And recently, after the shooting on Valentine's Day, Ocean View wanted to organize a peace sign, and so I wanted my class to feel super involved and engaged and actually know what they were doing, so they had to do all the math behind it. They had to go out to the playground, measure everything, figure out the circumference of the peace sign, calculate the average arm span of a elementary school student, multiply it by the number of kids in the class, pair them with the buddy class, direct everyone out into the field, and they were like, we did this. We planned this. So I think giving kids ownership of the issues And that last standard in the social justice standards, action. Can't just talk about it in the dialogue, you got to do something with it.
I use a lot of, we both do, we use a lot of VTS, visual thinking strategies. So you put an image and you get kids to talk about what they see and what they're connecting to. And then we pull that through so that they're looking at an image, they're making connections, and then you're teaching the lessons and the vocabulary to help them access what that image really was that they were looking at. So last night I was preparing my United Farm Workers lesson, and we talk about environmental justice and what it is. And I start by showing them pictures of field laborers. And I don't tell them that those are pictures of my family members until later. But they're breaking down. What is that a picture of? What are you noticing? I'm noticing that their bodies are covered. It looks like it's hot. I notice they're bent over. So they're accessing the curriculum before, in a way that they're either previewing it, but it's in a way that it's kind of a sneaky way of getting them into connecting with it, so that they can go deeper later.
I want to thank you for this. Great presentation, and it's really exciting to see how you're making the curriculum come alive. That makes a huge difference to the students. It really, I'm sure they will carry this with them the rest of their lives, and it's really important. So thank you for all you're doing.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
I want to thank you
Jacob has a
for allowing different schools to come and present, because when we first got this, we're like, oh, wow, I don't know, we're not good at presenting. That's not, I don't know. I don't like the microphone. There were so many different thoughts and feelings and emotions, but when we sat down, we make so much. Teachers make so much, and we're holding so much, and we're processing so much. To put it all together and look at each other and go, wow, we can't even put all the different items that we're focusing on. So to look at each other and go, wow, that looks good. We know it feels good, but it's really neat to. This was more of a validation to ourselves. Like, yes, we knew we were doing well, but it's really neat to put it all in one place. So thank you for listening and asking good questions.
Jacob, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick. I wanted to thank you guys for your excellent presentation. I can tell your enthusiasm for it, and I'm sure it trickles down to the students. I also agree with Board Member Blanchard as far as getting this up on the website, for people to see this wonderful project that you're doing. And with your permission, if I can use some of your ideas in my classroom.
Please, and contact us.
Yeah, show us
Contact
what you're
us.
doing and how you change it.
No,
That's the only way we get better, is by sharing. We make it better.
Yeah, I know teachers share with each other, but I still wanted to ask before I started using some of your ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the consent calendar. I know the superintendent had a couple of changes or comments, and does anyone else have any comments or changes, items to discuss in the consent calendar? And Superintendent?
Thank you, President Black. I would like to pull off of the personal action order the Brandon Mohan leave of absence, take that off of the PAO. And also, before the board approves the consent calendar, you will notice on there that there's a personal action order for our new Director of Human Resources. And I want to take this time to introduce to you Cheryl Cotton. I'm actually going to ask Cheryl to go stand up right next to the microphone. No pressure. While I read wonderful things about you. Cheryl Cotton has served as the Director of Human Resources for certificated employees in the West Contra Costa Unified School District for the past 6 years. Before her work in human resources, she served as a principal for 11 years at Charles Drew Academy in Bayview, Hunters Point, Valley View Elementary School in El Sobrante, and Madera Elementary School in El Cerrito in the San Francisco Unified School District and West Contra Costa Unified School District. Prior to becoming a principal, Cheryl worked with what is called BASES, which is now the National Equity Project, a nonprofit school reform organization. She was a school coach and a project coordinator for the Reading Apprenticeship Program with WestEd that allowed her to work with teams of high school teachers throughout the Bay Area on literacy instruction. Her coaching experience also included facilitating intensive summer institutes and school year events with a focus on equity. Cheryl began her career in education as a first and second grade teacher in Oakland Unified and New Haven Unified School Districts. Throughout her 23-year career in education, she has held a variety of positions that have allowed her to gain a breadth of experience in different schools and district settings, and a depth of knowledge of what great teaching is and how to move towards excellence at the site and district level. Cheryl received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Social Welfare from the University of California, Berkeley, and her Master of Arts degree in Education from Mills College. She is also currently working towards her doctorate in education from UC Berkeley. And I don't know when their completion date is, but is it coming up?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I am just want to let you know that I did an awful lot of phone calling, but I would say the best phone call I got was from Cheryl's Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, who started his conversation with a huge sigh and said, "You're going to take her away from us, aren't you? It's going to be really hard to fill her shoes." So I'm very happy that you are joining us in Albany. You're going to find us a wonderful district to work with. And with that, I'd like to at least present to you Cheryl Cotton, who is going to be our new HR director.
Thank you. Would you like to make... You don't have to, but would you like to make some comments?
I just want to say I'm very excited to be coming to Albany. I'm very sad to be leaving West Contra Costa Unified School District as well. I've worked there for 14 years now. Although Albany feels like an extension of my community, I went to El Cerrito High School, went to UC Berkeley. It's all one community. So I'm really excited to be joining you and really looking forward to working with all of you.
Great. Well, welcome.
And I believe her son is here. Is he still here?
He went home.
He had to go home.
He's not feeling too good. He had a little oral surgery today. He was trying to be a trooper, but but yes. So thank you so much.
Any questions or comments?
Oh, your mom is here also?
My mother is here.
Oh, welcome.
My mother is a retired teacher from West Contra Costa. She of what, 42 years, Mommy? She was 40 years. She was my first grade teacher, so.
Well, okay. Well, we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Okay. So we need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
It's always fun.
Board and superintendent report.
Thank you, President-elect trustees. And Julie, if you can put the slide up for me, please. At the last two board meetings, I've been sharing about AB 2808, which is the Murasuchi bill for increasing educational funding from the state. And I did mention the last time that Kim Chertain and I had gone to another trip to Sacramento to talk about special education funding. And I promised the audience and the parents that once we found out when the bill was going to be authored, that I would bring it to the board to at least share some information. So last week, Friday, I was notified by the California School Funding Coalition that AB 3136, which is authored by Assemblymember O'Donnell, this is special education funding. Unfortunately, both bills, AB
2808.
Thank you, 2808 and 3613, are going to be held at the Assembly Education Committee meeting at the same time. And that is going to be, I think, on April 11th. So the letter writing campaign, we really have to double our efforts. And what this will do is this is going to address funding equity for special education to level up the base. This is part of AB 602 funding to get us to the 95th percentile. And I know you can read this, but what's important to know is this is a funding that is going to help our district and many districts across the state to try to bridge the funding gap for mandated services and critically needed services. So we just sent out to the entire Albany community this afternoon another email. It is also on our website, information about AB 3136 with a letter that you can author, you can email it in, you can write it in. I sent all my letters in today. Really advocating in support of AB 3136. And so I know that there's some members of our special education staff who are getting this information out to parents. So I really want to encourage you all, Again, Albany is small, but we are mighty, and I think we can make a difference. And Kim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but that is my report.
Nothing except that I hope to get email reminders out to the community a couple of times before we start spring break so that we can maximize our participation. It does really matter. They do notice when the letters and emails start coming in.
And the deadline is April 2nd, and if you think that students aren't mighty and powerful, I met with the Student Equity Advisory Council today at Albany High School, and they all signed the letter, and I mailed them off today.
Terrific. Kim, I know you wanted to comment on the city council meeting.
Yeah, so I attended last week's city council meeting for their discussion about ranked choice voting. For those of you in the audience, the school board passed a resolution supporting the idea of using ranked choice voting to elect the school board. The bottom line is the city council voted against putting it on the ballot to see what Albany citizens prefer. There wasn't much discussion on whether ranked choice is a better system for representative democracy, and I think that might be an area of common agreement. The council focused on the fact that the state set up a safe harbor provision to the California Voter Rights Act so that if voting occurs by district, you cannot be sued as being in violation of the California Voter Rights Act. So some members of the council expressed that going to districts is the obvious path for Albany, both the city and the school district, to take to avoid potential litigation. Because ranked choice voting demonstrates robust representation, you could say that, first, it's unlikely that Albany would be sued if we went in that direction, and secondly, it would be unlikely that the court would rule against us. However, those are unknowns. And the fact that there is a legal safe harbor is compelling to the city council. Council members acknowledge that it's been hard to find candidates for both school board and city council in the past, but some members objected to the charter committee's rejection of districting. I went back and I viewed the video of the presentation that we saw on November 14th. And right about at minute 39 is the section on districting. And basically, the Charter Review Committee felt that districting would be so negative to Albany, they devoted their efforts to see what we could do that would be representational and show our diverse population without having to district. Where the city council sort of diverged with that, Councilmember Nason stated that she thought that campaigning in your own neighborhood would be less daunting to a candidate than a citywide race. So that's where the council seems to be at. It's still unclear to me what would happen if Albany set up districts and then found that no candidates come forward. It could be very difficult to find, and if you really have to twist somebody's arm to get them to take a seat, well, you know, that shouldn't be what
Kim, you can't really editorialize.
Sorry, okay.
This is just a report.
Yeah, okay. So anyhow, the council's decision was to ask staff to determine what it would cost to have an assessment done to see if Albany's past election indicate a bias against protected groups.
Thanks. Okay, we can't really discuss this unless we put it back on the agenda, which we could do. But this is just the
Can you
board
take
report.
Can you take it to the 2x2x2 meeting on another occasion? It sounds to me like the board and the council have gone, they have something to talk about.
It sounds like something, maybe not 2x2x2, maybe we should just talk with the city, because the university won't care. But yes, that is, we could take it to the city and try to, and in fact, we have talked before of having a joint meeting of the school board and the city council, and that might be a great topic for it.
Just to add that in our resolution, we did not ask the city to put a ballot measure on asking voters specifically if they want the school board elected by ranked choice. So we stopped short of that. And that would still be an option. It wouldn't really cost the city any more money. It would be a very minimal upcharge, since there's going to be a number of things on the ballot already.
Okay, so we can't discuss it now, but do you want to put that on the agenda? You don't have to answer now. At the end of the meeting, when we talk about items added by the board, you can say then whether you.
Yeah, let's revisit it then.
Yeah, I will be endorsing that we take this up as an agenda item.
Okay, great. Anyone else have something to report? Jacob?
Yeah, just a couple of things about last Saturday. In the morning, I went to the Albany Preschool Spring Fair, which was originally scheduled for Memorial Park, but they weren't sure about the weather. So at the last second, I guess they had it over at the middle school, and it was a wonderful event. Nice to see all the families there having such fun. My daughter performed there, so I was there to see her as well. And after that, we went over to Ocean View to see the Cornell's Got Talent, where my daughter and a lot of her other classmates were there. And it was just so nice to see all the parents and children and the community members just having a really wonderful time. And I wanted to give a shout out to Coach Joel over at Cornell, who's been running the talent show for quite a few years now, and for all the parents who helped out. And it's just really nice to see everybody having such a great time.
Okay, thanks. Any other reports? How about the student board member report?
Cornell's 5th grade students will be photographed together in a group portrait at 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday, March 27th. Prints are $20.
SBAC testing will start on April 16th and continue until May 11th. Practice tests are available online.
Cornell had their annual talent show this Saturday. More than 75 kids performed, and it was quite the show.
Marin's Moonlight Auction was this Saturday, March 24th. It hosted a range of items and activities, including delicious food and drinks, beautiful art projects made by the children, a fun photo booth, and many items bid on. Thank you for all that participated.
STEAM Day is Saturday, April 21st. Come to Marin Elementary with your family to enjoy math and science-related activities brought to you by Marin PTA and friends, Albany High School students, and area businesses as well. The Bike Mobile will be here to fix and tune up your bike for free, along with bike safety messages. Please attend.
And that concludes the student board report.
Thank you. Any questions for the students? Okay, good. We have persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. Does anyone want to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda?
That's a common.
No? Good, thank you. Moving on. First staff report is promoting safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for all students and staff.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Student Services, Carrie Nerheim, who will give the report this week. Ms. Nerheim.
Good evening, everyone. I want to be in 4th grade at Ocean View. Amazing presentation. I just wanted to share with everyone that we have sent out the California Healthy Kids Survey. This is a survey we do every 2 years. We administer it to 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade students. I do want to make the board aware that this year, with the transition, 2 years ago it had been completed in February, and this year we're getting them finished by the end of March. So I just wanted to make you aware that it is a bit late this time, and planning for 2 years from now, we will make sure we again have a custom survey. We administered the same custom survey this year that we had had 2 years prior. And we met with DLT to talk about for the upcoming one 2 years from now that we may make some changes to that custom survey. It goes out to the students in those grades, it goes out to staff, and it goes out to families, to parents. So that went out. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew it was out. And does anybody have any questions?
Kim?
Yeah, I thought we discussed last spring of adding a bit more to the custom module in view of last spring's event, but it sounds like you just said that we gave the identical survey that had been given 2 years ago.
We did.
So there was no new questions related to school atmosphere.
There were not this time. And in DLT, that was brought up by the principals, and so I can only apologize that it was in the transition from me coming on, that time-wise, I didn't do it. So 2 years from now, we will absolutely add that component to it.
I don't mean to blame you. I think it was probably more in Peter's, seat than yours.
Not at all. Not at all.
In terms of the results of the Healthy Kids Survey, where do you really take that into account? Because I know a lot of kids, it's kind of pervasive as they get a little older, tend to put some not so factual results on there. Do you look at?
Factual results.
Do you
What?
Well, it's just based off what I hear from the student population. So do you how do you examine that data and determine what's true and what's false?
That is an excellent question.
I can jump in here
Thank you.
because I've been hearing it for, every year on the board we talk about it, and we don't. I mean, we pretty much take it at face value. We do look at trends from grade to grade and from survey to survey, which, if you assume that the students are making things up at about the same rate each time, I guess the trends might still be valid.
Okay.
But yeah, we're aware of that, but there's really no way to know.
Right. Because then you'd be getting rid of data, and that could just skew the whole
Right.
thing. Okay. Awesome.
We would hope that the lies would be balancing out. That the kids who have never used drugs and say they have balance the ones who do and say they never have.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no way to know that.
All right. Thank you.
President Black, thank you so much for fielding that question.
Mahima?
I don't know how to phrase this. I think one of the issues we should be looking into, or I don't know if this is more of like a philosophical, perfect ideal world situation, but I think when people look at the Healthy Kids Survey, like we said, like sometimes you're not as inclined to answer as accurately as you should, but I also think that goes back to the format, and we do this every 2 years. And also the bigger question of, whether if I feel like I don't fit in, or I feel like I don't have, the support at school, if I answer that on this thing, will that actually make a difference? And will there be, will we see a change in 2 years or however long, So my sort of feeling is that we should maybe try to field this test or, some other mode of survey, and also let the students know that, we do look at these trends and we do take your responses into account, and maybe sometimes the number data, the rankings, because that's how it works, right? When you answer, might not be the most valuable. Maybe real insight and responses written out. I mean, you'll still get questions that won't really, or answers that are kind of not true. But I think, do students know that we look at these trends and we try to reassess the situation?
That's a great point. Thank you. Kim?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but not only does the board look at the results of the Healthy Kids Survey, but I think it's examined within the district in great detail, and it's published on the California dashboard. So it's one of the criteria that anybody looking at our district could easily find this data and judge us based on it. So it's a public piece of information. In terms of it's called Local Climate Survey on the California dashboard.
That's true. That's new, but that's true. And going forward, it could attract attention, good or bad. Anyone else? Charlie?
Do you have a time frame for when you might bring back the results to the board?
Thank you for asking. I actually put in a call to them today to get copies of them, and I'm waiting to hear back for when we will have results. My hope is that we would even have them as soon as the end of this year, but that might be ambitious. So certainly by the beginning of our next school year, so that we can use the results to inform our practice.
Great.
But I'll find out.
Evan?
Just for clarification, is the California Healthy Kids Survey administered by the state? Like, is it a mandatory thing, or is it something that's available to schools for them to administer?
Mandatory every 2 years.
It's mandatory. The schools can customize it, but the basic
Okay.
survey is mandatory.
Okay, cool. Maybe this would be room for another discussion, and I think it is, but if we could look more into formatting it in a different way, because I know the versions that are available right now and that students have taken kind of make it prone to abuse and unfactual answers that are branded within.
Well, I don't know that we can change the format, but if we could give feedback to the people who create it, that could be very useful. Thank you. Jacob?
I know it's hard to find out if everything is factual on there, but then if it's going to be posted on a website to kind of give a glimpse of what our district is like, what's to stop us or from the students deciding, oh, we just want to rebel and we just want to answer the question, and then it gets posted onto some website stating this is the feel of.
Yeah, there's really nothing to stop it, but that's true in every district, so we can hope that, statewide, it's all the same. But yes, that if the students were all angry about something and decided they were going to, there's no way to stop that. It's just in the design of the survey. But Navin seems to have some ideas about how the survey could be improved to limit that, and that would be very valuable feedback.
And I will definitely convey that feedback, both of the feedback that you gave.
Thanks. Do we have any comments or questions from the audience? Nima.
I think also going back to how this data is used and how we use it in our district, but it's also online. When there's standardized testing or some sort, there's sort of that blurb that every single proctor has to read out, and I find that a lot of the times that I think every time I've taken this test, it's just sort of given out, and you're like, everyone has to do it. Give it to me at the end of advisory, and it's sort of like, if people were more aware of how this data is used, why are you having to take this test? Is it just so that it's online, or is it also because that these trends, do help, people on the board and people at the top of the district make decisions that can and will be impactful? I think like having a sort of protocol for letting people know what this is every single time that you administer it would be really helpful.
Yes, that's a great suggestion.
That is great.
No, come on up, please.
I just wanted to respond to our wonderful students. I know that in the past, and I've been working at Albany High for 13 years now, we take the data, and the mental health department especially crunches it really intensely, and we use it to drive professional development, particularly the numbers on, do you have a person at school who is your person? Is there anybody here that you trust? Just to try to figure out how to be the people you need us to be. So for you two personally, I'm just letting you know if you want to spread the word to your peers or figure out a way amongst the board to communicate that, we take it really seriously. And we know that there's some grains of salt in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the record, can you please state your name for the...
Sure can.
Thank you.
I'm Becca Burns. I'm a counselor at the high school.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Becca.
Terrific. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you all.
Special education update.
Thank you, President Black, trustees. And I told the board at the last board meeting that I was meeting with several groups of staff, educators, to get feedback from them about special ed concerns and issues. And so while you have a 3-page sort of executive summary, I took about 15 to 16 pages of notes. So what I did was I looked at some through lines and looked at some commonalities, and there are some things I put in here that may not have necessarily been by an entire group of people, but they may have represented a group that is normally a small representation. So I'll be happy to answer questions on this, but I do want to highlight a few things that I noticed. So first of all, I had a chance to meet with the paraprofessionals from all of our sites, including our Albany Children's Center, special education teachers, specialists, a few administrators, and I've been to 2 sites to just meet with the general staff. And I believe I have 2 more sites that have invited me, an elementary school and the Albany High School. So the conversations will continue. I categorize these in some areas that I think will help the board understand more. The first one is the issue on initial assessments. And the consistent request here across all grade levels and all sites was for assistance for initial assessments. And there was a bit of a variety on the type of assistance needed, anywhere from, can we have somebody that does the initial assessments, to know we really like doing our initial assessments. However, I'll give an example, elementary teachers, they may have one person, doing the assessments. And so time seemed to be a pretty big mitigating factor. There was also some through lines that in the last, I'm just going to say decade, and it's probably longer, but what was shared with me was in the last 10 years, the complexity of assessments and the IEPs has increased significantly. And teachers really shared with me what it takes to do an initial assessment and what it takes to really work on an IEP. So I did see some through lines on that. There was an acknowledgement that elementary sites may have more of a need, and that is because they don't have a daily prep. As you know, that elementary teachers have a weekly prep, and so a lot of their assessments are done either before school, after school, or being done on time outside of the school day. In the area of case management, again, there was very, very common and consistent feedback that the complexity of case management has increased over the last decade. And it's not that there are more students, but that the needs are more complex. And the attention to detail and to creating a plan that is tailored for a student to meet their needs has become much more complex as well. And I'm using the word complex a lot because I don't want the board to misinterpret. I don't mean intense. I mean, I think the staff was really clear with me is that this is not that it's the intensity of the student need, but that student needs have changed over the last 10 years. There was a bit, some differing viewpoints on whether one person do all the case management and other teachers pick up an extra class, to is there a way that teachers can still do the case management, but to give them some sort of relief. Now, I want to say that this is really tied to some comments. So you got to kind of imagine that as some of these comments were being made, other comments filtered in that you see later in this report, and that is one comment about the need for more special education teachers, highly qualified teachers, to provide sort of this push-in model. And got a really good question from a board member. What is the difference between a push-in and a pull-out? A push-in model is when a teacher would actually go into the classroom and assist and provide support. And that's a very generalized description. So I think that some of the through lines also in terms of caseload and case management is a lot of teachers want to case manage because they feel that they can get to know their students, get to know the families well. On the other side of the coin, I've also heard staff say if one person did the case management, that one person would be able to assist the teachers to get those kinds of needs met as well. I'm going to kind of run through a little bit more of this pretty quickly.
There was a legal opinion involved.
The legal opinion on this one for case management was that we not use the suggestion of one person case manage because of some legal compliance issue on caseload. So I'm working with Diane Marie to get some clarity on that, but from legal counsel, they recommended that this was not a good idea. On the scheduling of IEP meetings, so this one was very interesting because, again, very clear that scheduling IEP meetings is time intensive. The classified clerk position could be added to assist sites. And so, as you know, at the last board meeting, I let you know that I did authorize to have a clerk provide this assistance to the middle and the high school. This was more of a middle and high school recommendation. There was also a request which I thought was very interesting, and this was not something that was made by a lot of people, but when I mentioned it, people kind of went, yeah, that'd be a really good idea. And that is to maybe have the district allocate some sub-coverage once a month so our elementary teachers can hold their IEPs within the school day, because, again, they don't have a daily prep. The biggest feedback that I received was around the issue of paraprofessionals. And so I'll briefly go through this real quickly. There is consistent feedback that paraprofessionals, that we would like to have quality paraprofessionals, and that I would say almost to every person that I spoke to as a paraprofessional, they want training. They want professional development in several areas, and I gave you some bullet points on the areas where they would like to have some training in. And not just one-time training. This is ongoing training they would like to have every year. One of the struggles that they're having, though, is that paraprofessionals are paid for the time that they're with their students, and so anything outside of that, there would need to be compensation. Some, not all, but some paras have jobs in other capacities. Some have childcare issues and can't always make it to professional development. Recruitment and hiring special ed paras and substitutes is a high priority. And at our next board meeting, we will have our SELPA director come in and talk more about that and some of the needs across the Bay Area. There was also a lot of comments around morale. And one of the things that I heard was that paraprofessionals want to be treated as professionals. They do not want to be treated as if they are a subset of a staff or a faculty. And so they were asking for something pretty honest and basic, and that is, please recognize us. Please don't lump us into one of the bigger recognitions that you do for staff, but can you please acknowledge our paraprofessionals? There was also feedback about placement, that trying to keep paraprofessionals either at their site or, if possible, with the student throughout the student's tenure. For some had that desire. Others understood that we really want to have students become independent learners. I think there was a stronger desire for paras to remain at their site, and that is because, and this I heard is a very clear through line, that there is a sense of community at a school site that teachers feel. And so paraprofessionals build relationships with teachers, they build relationships with families, and they would like to stay at their sites. I think substitute para coverage goes without saying. We don't have enough substitute paras, and recruiting is difficult, and that is going to be an ongoing issue. The issue around para salary and benefits, I would say across the board, teachers and paras and support staff all suggested and advocated for looking at salary and benefits for our paraprofessionals to pay them a wage that would keep them in Albany. We are looking at our para salary schedule, and it is lower than some in neighboring districts. It's on par with others, but we definitely need to look at that. Paraprofessional hours was interesting because I got some consistent feedback around paraprofessionals wanting to increase their hours, but it's not just that they wanted the hours increased. Really had to do with the ability to meet with teachers before and after school to collaborate, to meet with each other to collaborate, so that they could provide support to students in a more effective manner. There were, in the issue on para duties, that was very interesting. There were some through lines here too. Some paraprofessionals felt that they were expected to either teach or reteach. Others felt that It was not teaching or reteaching, rather it was helping the student, after the teachers taught the lesson, to provide support. However, what I did hear, this is more of a secondary concern. Because students have several courses at the middle and high school level, the curriculum is much more, it could be more difficult. And so some paraprofessionals felt that they did not have the curriculum knowledge and would like to have some training around that, or to have some time to meet with the teacher so that they can learn more about the curriculum so they can support the student. Mathematics was the biggest through line that I heard. I heard we can teach science, we can read the literature. Math was the key area where there was a need. And finally, on the area of communication, feedback, and collaboration, I think I touched on collaboration, that there's consistent feedback of wanting to be able to collaborate. On communication feedback, I heard some very clear through lines that they would like to have more opportunities to speak with central office special ed department, opportunities to meet with a special ed director. Several were appreciative of the special education roundtable that our director has created, but at the same time, they're asking for more central office staff to come to the school sites, sit in a classroom, help out, shadow a para, and see what the duties are like. So some of the next steps, our special ed director is working with staff to create a paraprofessional handbook, and this is going to be shared with sites. We will also be working with our HR department. As our HR person, our new director left already. We'll speak with her in the future. To create an orientation program for our paraprofessionals, that they get some orientation, some training before they are assigned to a site or begin working with students. We did allocate a 0.5, a half FTE full-time equivalent position, will be allocated to assist with initial assessments at our elementary sites, since that is the area that has the most need at this time. And this will begin in the 18-19 school year. This will not cost additional dollars to the district. We're going to be reallocating some funding and FTE to that. The Director of Special Ed and our SELPA Director, SELPA stands for Special Education Local Plan Area, to work on a professional development program for paraprofessionals that can be created throughout the school year. The classified clerk position has been posted. I believe we've hired somebody. We will continue with the Special Education Roundtable. I am going to continue to meet with general education teachers. And I'm going to also work with the new HR director on a process for conducting exit interviews for our staff. So staff who leave will be working on exit interviews. And I'm going to try really hard to explore the concept of providing substitute coverage for our elementary sites once a month, so teachers can hold their initial assessments and their IEP meetings. There are so many, many more comments that were made, but I kind of gave you the gist of it. The board already knows that I'm working with Berkeley City College to recruit paraprofessionals, and hopefully to get our MOU with Peralta City College, Community College District. What I do want to say in summary, I found our teachers and our paraprofessionals and our specialists to be very, very passionate, but everybody is overworked. And everybody feels that there's just not enough time built into the day to provide the kinds of services that we wish we could give to everybody and to hire. I'm going to look into the concept of seeing what our caseload looks like next year for whether we are adequately staffing special education teachers. But as you know, all of this comes with certain cost. But at this point, I would say that we make decisions based upon student need. And that is my report.
Thanks. Questions from the board? Charlie?
So thank you very much for the report and for all the work that you and other people are doing, digging into what will best serve our students. So thank you for that. I do have a couple questions. One is just going back to your comment about student needs becoming more complex or having become more complex. And I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit for us. To what extent is that because there are more requirements involved in assessing student need? To what extent is that a changing population? And what does that look like if it does involve, say, real changes in student population? Maybe you could elaborate on that.
So I can elaborate in the sense of what I have heard staff tell me. I do know we have a couple of folks in the audience. I know Richie is here, so I don't know if he wants to clarify, or he can nod if he thinks I'm, yes, Val, you're right on, or no, you are way off base. Some of the things that I've learned, that special education, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back maybe 30 years when I started teaching. There was a certain spectrum of the needs for a student with special needs. That spectrum has widened tremendously. A student might have social-emotional needs that would help them be qualified for special education services. We have, as you know, identified within the last few years the autism spectrum. I would say the complexity of what a student needs, it's not, this is one need the student has, therefore create the IEP for that one need. I think that we are recognizing as a society that one thing affects something else. So while someone might need a particular service in the area of, it may be a skill that they need to learn, it might also mean that it has in its effect other issues that the student might need support in. So when I say the complexity, one is, yes, there are some legal complexities that have just increased over the last decade. But I think the needs of the children they feel more complex, and they are more complex because we have more awareness now. And we understand to educate the whole child, it's more than just fixing one thing. I'm going to look over here. Is that a nod, or am I doing okay, Rich? Am I doing to add anything on there? If you do, can you come up to the...
So while he's walking up, I'll just add that what I think I heard you say in part is that the spectrum of recognized needs is broader than it used to be. And so that's a recognition that maybe we weren't meeting needs in the past, and we're now recognizing those needs.
And the type of service that we can provide to the student as well.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for that report, and thank you for taking the time to research that. I would like to acknowledge that we have paraprofessionals in the audience who have taken the time from their home life to come here, and they value this report as well. And I'm not going to speak for them, but I want to acknowledge that they're here, so thank you for that. And also, I think we have the Director of Special Ed who could actually provide some of those answers that you're
So I did not see...
that you're asking, Mr. Blanchard, and I'm happy to fill in the blanks from there because I work at the trench level in the classroom.
So, Demi, can you come up? Would you help clarify some of what Charlie was asking? I'm not sure if I answered the question as succinctly as I wanted to.
What I see as the biggest change is the increase in students with mental health issues. We have from anxiety to depression, school phobia, schizophrenia. We have it all, and the kids are intense, and that makes the evaluations intense. Back when the last governor left office, he redlined AB 3632. At that point in time, if a child needed a residential placement or a counseling enriched classroom, County Mental Health picked up the expense and provided the service, the mental health services. And they had an entire staff of MFWs, social workers that provided this support to students. And they were providing a medical model support. And if a child needed a residential placement, the county picked up the cost for that. And the district's sole obligation was the education of the child. When that went away, it became the district's education, all of it, or expense, all of it, and our responsibility. So we are doing a lot more social emotional assessments. sometimes referred to as educationally related mental health assessment, or ERMS. And we are providing that service for the students. However, it's an educationally related service, therefore the therapy, the mental health support, is focusing on helping the child at school and helping the child, giving the child the strategies that they need to be successful in school. So I would say the biggest thing I have seen is the intense mental health needs, and it is an increase. And I mean, in the last 10 years, it's really gone up substantially, and that is across our SELPA, across California, and from my friends who work in the business in New York, it's the same there. And I don't know what that says.
Charlie?
So I think what I'm taking away from this, do correct me if I'm not getting this right, is that you'd like us to understand that everything is connected to everything else. And certainly what Diane has just mentioned, mental health counseling, sounds like there's been a change in that the services that had previously been provided to students may have been broader than what we are able to provide. And so if for those students they were in the past receiving broader services across the full range of mental health concerns, then they now receive. Yeah, you're going to correct me on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that we are meeting their needs. As far as mental health, we hired another psychologist who provides counseling. I would say the biggest impact is the students who we're working with now are more intense or more complex, but in many ways more intense, because now, for example, in our resource, the students aren't just there for reading or math. They're there and they have significant behaviors and significant mental health issues. So the teachers are working on helping them overcome anxiety and strategies and acting out behaviors. We have a lot more behavior plans than we did.
So what you're saying was that in the past, students with those kinds of mental health needs were cared for by the county, given residential placements, and were not in our schools necessarily. Or if they were getting more support from the county for their mental health needs. And now it's up to us to give them all that support.
Yes and no. Or as the attorney says, it depends. When the children were receiving it, yes, in some extent, those who had more intense needs were seen, like at Berkeley Mental Health, at Children's Hospital. That's where they went to receive their services. That said, we had less than a dozen students receiving those services, so there were fewer of them. What I see is the number of students with significant social, emotional, and mental health needs has, just
It's just objectively increased. Do you have any idea why?
I wish I did.
I mean, is this people moving to Albany for the services,
No.
or it's more problems in the community, or more recognized problems?
It is the same across all the schools in our SELPA. Our SELPA director reports that it is increased all over the state of California. Everybody is talking about the intensity of the needs of our students. And it is not just students with disabilities. There are students who are in general education who have severe needs in the area of mental health. The fact that we have Shelley and Sally and all of their interns and every one of them is busy and has nowhere to pick up more kids. And we've got Heather at the elementary, so it's huge.
Charlie?
So I guess one comment is that this is part of a trend that's been going on for a while. I mean, if we think back to 2005, one of the additions that was made at that time was putting in mental health counseling, which didn't exist at all here in the district until that time. It was recognizing that that need was there. I mean, not just that the need had increased, but that there was a need. I don't know that we even recognized the need prior to that. But now I think what you're saying is that the need has been increasing in the last decade. Maybe you could say a little more. Has that materialized grade by grade, or does each year bring more students at every grade level with those needs?
It spans preschool right up through high school.
So I'm just trying to think as a grade cohort moves up, you know, from 4th to 5th to 6th to 7th grade, it's not exactly the same group of kids, but it is a fairly consistent cohort of kids, and yet you see the needs increasing year after year with each age cohort.
Yes, and I mean, this year we put a new program at Marin Elementary, and it's a special day class, and that's counseling supported. And it's a very, very, very small classroom with a teacher and 1.5 paras. The one para is split between the resource and this class. And I mean, we put that in place when we saw that need, because we had kids who just could not be successful in a general ed classroom because of their behaviors.
That's remarkable. Other questions from the board? Jacob?
Okay, well, first I want to acknowledge our paras, if that's para quarterback there. Thank you for coming. Yeah. There's a couple of things in the report that I wanted to point out. Under collaboration, Val, your second bullet there, some paraprofessionals wanted to be a part of the IEP team meetings with staff. And I remember hearing that from a parent, too, that came to speak to the board. And it seems to me that also addresses the need for acknowledgement of being a professional and the morale aspect that you mentioned. So I would very much like to see the district find a way to, if a parent wants to include their child's paraprofessional in their IEP meeting, that para could be paid for that, hour that it takes. Of course, I think it depends on the parent allowing and desiring that, but there's the paraprofessional is going to be the one who has the most day-to-day contact with the student, and so it seems to me like that would be a win-win in several directions.
There were two common threads of that particular area. One is some paras seeing an absolute value of being part of that IEP meeting if the parent so desired it. The other vein that was also discussed by some paras was not necessarily being in the actual IEP meeting with the parent, but being in the IEP team meeting when the teachers meet, like the general education teacher and special ed teacher meets, that the para is part of that team meeting because they are with the child as much as the teacher is. So I kind of saw sort of two veins in that.
Well, it seems to me there's a lot of value in the few hours that would take, that would certainly translate to benefit to students. The other thing is the paraprofessional hours. That's come up several times, and it does seem to me like when we're planning for staff next year that we really need to make sure that the day is covered for those children whose IEP requires that. So, for example, at the middle school, if a child requires a paraprofessional, that paraprofessional be scheduled until the end of the school day, so that we don't have paras losing pay beginning at 2:30 because that's when their time runs out. I really hope that we can find a way to make their day coincide with the school day.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to do is I'd like to acknowledge the steps that have been taken from the staff. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank the parents and the staff members for actually making this happen. You know, I think it should have been happening a while ago, but we can't change the past. As far as the IEP meetings, I'd like to advocate that they do have subs, so the elementary teachers aren't working past their contractual hours. I don't know if they're being required to work after their contractual hours, or they're just doing it because, as teachers do, they care about the kids and go above and beyond. But if they're going to be working after contractual hours, they should be paid for it. So it might be better in the long run to get them subs. So I highly advocate for that. I'd also like to advocate for para training. I don't know why this wasn't happening before, but I think this should be happening as soon as possible. I mean, for them to just be trying to just wing it, or, you know, I'm sure they do on their own talk to teachers and get trained themselves, but it should be provided to the district. So that's one more thing I'd like to advocate for. And also, I would like to apologize to all of the paras for, you had mentioned before that sometimes they don't feel respected or honored, and I think that's a shame. So personally, myself, I'd like to apologize and let you know that I personally do respect what you guys do. I'm a teacher myself, and I see paras at my school just going above and beyond. And as far as the culture of our district, that's something we should really work on, because when I was reading this, it's not okay. So.
And I did want to clarify that that was not mentioned by every pair, but that was a through line.
That's enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the audience? Okay.
My name is Morgan Paschke.
Could you pull the mic down a little bit?
I'm a paraprofessional at the Albany Middle School. Prior to this, I started in 1986 for West Contra Costa County. At that time, we had severely multiply handicapped, which were severe physical disabilities, as well as mental, sorry, I get nervous. What's the word I want? Deficit. Cognitive deficits. And we also had Down syndrome and developmental delays. Thank you. It's changed greatly. I left it for several years and went into rehab and worked with equipment sales for many years. Came back to it, and it's very different. I don't have that same student body anymore. What I have now are children that actually are higher functioning, but for whatever reason, they're on what is called the spectrum. They have a broad bunch of needs, and a lot of them are behavioral, partly because they don't get the social, emotional interactions that we had as children. When I was a kid, I had free range. I could go out. I also had a big family. I learned my social skills from my siblings and my neighbors, and I learned the right way to fight. Our children don't have that today. They're scheduled to death. Every minute of their day is scheduled. So we actually have to teach them. We have to prepare them, because they don't have siblings. A lot of them are single families, and they don't have the social interactions except for the sports, which is a great avenue, but there's so many more. I work in Albany because it takes care and values art and music and theater, and those skills help these children so much. I would like to see a drama program just for these children, so that they can learn through interactions and playing how to combat some of these disabilities. But they're severe. They're severe enough that we take not only verbal abuse on a daily basis, but sometimes physical abuse. They don't mean to do it. The kids don't have control. They're sorry for it the moment it happens, but it still happens. I would like to say that we have had some behavior management education. Diane Marie, for 2 years, had our behavior analyst come in and have an after-school program for those of us that could stay, and they compensated for it. But we have second jobs. So we had an average of 10 people Out of all of our paras, we had an average of 10 come to those workshops. They were very valuable. We need more of that, but we also have to figure out a way, I'm not saying I want to give up any of my summer, but I would. If coming in a month early and having the training before we go into the classroom and really being able to not just hear a lecture, I'm sorry, you have to work it. Okay, you have to work it, and if you're not working it, you're losing it. So that's the big picture when you're asking what is our population like. Autism is increasing. It is becoming more prolific. It's going to be a monster. It's already difficult, but it is becoming epidemic. The other piece, I want to make a comment. I don't know if I should do this now or not, but I want to, on the salary, I think it's a twofold problem. I think bargaining is one piece, but Albany has not stepped up to the state standards for minimum wage. It has to be $15. I think it's 2020 or 2021 when it's scheduled. By then, the minimum wage is going to have to be $25. It's already there, really. So I encourage you to, if nothing else, get that minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I believe it's 12 at this time, and I believe our sub-pairs come in at $11.96 an hour. So they're still not even being paid minimum wage standards. So thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we're going to have to leave it there because we're running about a half an hour late. But we will continue this conversation next week because it's on the agenda of every meeting. Jacob?
Yeah, at the end of the meeting, can I talk about it then? Because I did want to say something about that, but I do understand we are behind schedule.
If you have something brief, you can say it now.
Yeah, I've been waiting for someone to say that ever since I've been on the school board to advocate for a $15 an hour wage. So I work in San Leandro, and we implemented it a couple years ago. So I don't know how to formally do this as far as make a motion, but I think that it's a statement that we can make to our employees that we value them, and we'll find ways to get it to $15 now. So I'm not sure we can agendize that in a public session because it might be a bargaining issue. We might have to talk about it in closed session. No, we can, but if we can put it on the agenda, we will. Who do you have to find out if we can do it? We can unilaterally decide that we're going to, we have to bargain and they're going to say no?
No, they won't, but the board, I'm not sure the board can take a position on that in public.
But I'm sure we can find out.
But we will find out, and if we can, we'll put it on the agenda. If we can't, we'll put it on the agenda for closed session, but we will talk about it.
And actually,
I'll ask in San Leandro too, because we have it, so somehow.
would it help if the board gave direction to staff to research that?
Thank you.
You're welcome, and we will do that.
Okay.
Oh, but I have one clarifying question. I'm so sorry. You're talking about the minimum wage for employees in the school district, not a minimum wage for the city of Albany.
No, for the school district.
Because that I can't do. Okay, yes, I can.
But not just paras, every employee.
Yeah, well, if it's a minimum wage, it's
$15 is for everybody.
Our staff can research that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so, good. Moving on, we have an overview of the 2016-17 Technology Speak Up Survey results. Dax has been sitting here waiting for us. So.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Technology, Dax Kajivara.
Good evening, trustees and student board members. Thank you for the opportunity to take these few minutes to speak about technology in the district. In the fall of 2016, the district for the first time ran the Speak Up survey. The Speak Up survey is a national technology survey that aims to measure opinions and assess the use of technology in K-12 classrooms throughout the United States. The results are used by Project Tomorrow, who runs the survey, to advocate for technology issues at the national level, and it's also a free survey that districts can use to measure their community's interests and opinions about technology. The Speak Up survey gives us a lot of data, much too much to talk about in this brief amount of time. So I have distilled the survey results down to a few key topics that we thought would be of interest. Those topics are first surrounding student equity and their access to devices and the internet at home while they're away from school. The second was opinions in the community concerning what they feel is the appropriate device model for students to have, talking about BYOD or one-to-one device models for students to use at school. And the last was opinions about communication between the district and teachers and parents. So first question was basically who took the survey. Just some background so you can see the validity of the survey. This slide shows that we had mostly, in the elementary schools, we focused on 3rd through 5th graders. The kindergarten through 2nd graders did take the survey, but their survey results we did not feel were necessarily reliable. They were often taken in a group setting, and it wasn't. There was a lot of concerns about whether the students understood the questions fully. So we focused on 3rd to 5th grade. Middle school, we had an impressive 96% of the students take it, and at the high school, they only had 1 grade take it. They didn't think logistically that they could get all the students to take it, and they felt the results would be more reliable if they focused on 1 grade, so they could get a good cross-section rather than just randomly asking kids to take the survey at the high school. Then we had 520 parents, and about 65% of our teachers take the survey. So the next question was, what kind of devices do students have access to at their home? And we found that, as I guess not surprisingly, smartphone usage was very high as and increasingly got higher as the kids got older. The green line is the high school students, and 90% of them have access to a smartphone with internet. Tablet usage was highest amongst the younger grades and decreased slightly thereafter. But I think this slide shows that many of our students have access to many more than 1 device at home. And they're usually smartphones, laptops, or tablets. At home, they aren't using Chromebooks very much. The next question was, how do students access the internet from home? And can they access the internet from home? This was key for us to understand kind of equity issues with assigning homework that required the internet. Our findings here were that there were very few students that did not have any access to the internet at home. That number was highest around 7% in grades 3 through 5. Again, it's unclear whether that means they have no access to the internet at home or their parents don't let them use the internet at home. But for the high school and middle school, that number with no home internet, which is shown at the bottom of this slide, was very, very low. We asked students, we asked students and parents how important it was for students to have access to devices in the classroom. And there's a few slides on this topic. The students this is, we wanted to get a little background. So students, we asked what kind of mobile device usage there was at school. The top shows the use of their own device, or BYOD. Only the high school had significant numbers of that. Significant numbers are using district Chromebooks at all levels, and only a few students said they do not use a device at school regularly. I'm not sure of the validity of that. I find it hard to believe that 10% of the middle school students never use a device at school. But as we would expect, it's mostly the district's Chromebooks that are being used at school. The middle school and elementary schools, by policy, do not allow student devices at school. Next is a slide showing the importance. We polled parents and high school and middle school students the importance of every student having a device to support their schoolwork at school. This could be thought of as those that think a one-to-one model would be important. Interestingly, parents thought it was less important than students, though I would say most people thought it was important. We look at about 55% of parents think it's very important, and of the high school students, about 40, close to 80 to 90%. Following that up, we asked parents what device ownership model they think works best for their student. About the middle, halfway down, we see use in class when needed, but not one-to-one. Got the most answers, the most responses. That was about 26%. And that's the model that we generally have here at the district with our Chromebook carts. About the top three could be thought of as one-to-one models, with either providing for their own child or the school providing for the children. That was up about 60%. No, sorry, 40% thought that was important. Interestingly, 5% no computer use at school at all. Interesting. The last section is an overview of how some parents' opinions about how the district or their school communicates with them. Most effective way for teachers to communicate, not surprisingly, about 90% or 85% of parents said that email was the most effective way. Face-to-face meetings was second, close to 40%. Asked how satisfied they were with the teacher-to-parent communication. A large majority said that they were either somewhat satisfied or very satisfied. Only about 15% were dissatisfied. Asked the same questions about district or school communication to parents. Again, a very high percentage prefer email. The website shows up here at about 20%. About 30% like the automated phone calls. I'm not one of those, but. And the parent satisfaction with school district communication. Again, a high percentage either somewhat satisfied or very satisfied, and close to that 15% somewhat dissatisfied. So in summary, at least the way that we've read the results, it seems that a large portion of students have access to devices and internet at home. Though there is some support for a one-to-one student-to-device model, more parents prefer having students share devices at school, and a large majority of parents indicate they are satisfied with district and school communication. That concludes the presentation, so if there's any questions.
Questions? Navin?
Absolutely. So I think that the school use of Chromebooks is really important. I think it gives students a lot of access in terms of not only the ability to research things online, but as well as like access to the internet. I think that's really important. However, one thing I did notice are the Chromebooks in terms of like physical quality of the Chromebooks. They are really prone to like certain like, you know, malfunctions, whether that be like not working the best or like, I don't know why, but some kids choose to pry out certain numbers or stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I did notice was that I'm in the photography class, and for photography we use the Apple, I feel like Mini Macs. I don't know what they are.
They're
like,
iMacs.
iMacs,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, sorry, I just used an iPhone. That's it. So I'm not too familiar with Apple. But I noticed that whenever the iMacs come around, in contrast to their counterparts in the Chrome cart kind of has like mess of wires and all these things, and some of them aren't working. But I've seen the iMacs in generally really good condition, and they're usually a lot faster in terms of like loading and stuff like that. And so I'm just wondering, have you taken a look at any of the different models of Chromebooks, or do you have any idea on how to phase? Because I know that the school kind of phased out the old gray ones for like the black ones. Is that true? Okay. And so in that case, are you in the future? Are you looking towards different models of Chromebooks? Are you gonna like? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. We have a 3-year refresh policy on the Chromebooks, so that's actually pretty quick. So that's why you saw the silver ones start to be phased out. Every year when we purchase the Chromebooks, we evaluate what the current models are. It is very difficult to find something that a student cannot destroy.
That's very true.
A motivated student can destroy pretty much anything that we try. But I think the black ones are hopefully a little bit better than the silver ones, so yeah.
Definitely, I agree. The black ones seem to be holding up a lot better than the silver. Because I remember the silver ones, you'd get them and there'd be like scratches on it. You'd be like, did this Chromebook get murdered? Was that a crime scene? But now the black ones, they're very, like, the worst problems I've seen are like maybe 1 or 2 missing keys, and even then they're still operable. So yeah, definitely.
Great. Alex, Ross?
So in education generally, we've gone to sort of this flipped classroom model for communication, and the ability of a kid, say, to sit down and watch a YouTube video and then go in the classroom time, do things interactively with the teacher. We really haven't done that outside of the classroom. It's a frustration to me every time I go to a back-to-school night, and it invariably is cart all the parents from room to room in a narrow bandwidth to hear a presentation that could have been videoed. And I just as a general suggestion to the district, where possible, it would be great to capture more things in ways that make them asynchronously viewable, reviewable. The teacher can record 10 minutes, this is what American history is like at this grade level. And the parent can go back and say, well, what are you covering in your class? Oh, I'll watch it online. It didn't show up in those charts, I think, because the question wasn't asked. Would you prefer to get communicated to by email or voice, phone, et cetera? What about being able to go online and see what the course curricula are, be introduced to the counseling staff, because there's a short bio from any of them. All that sorts of stuff could get done. I don't think we do a lot of video authoring, and there's obviously cost and time to do that. But I'm wondering if some of the cases where we end up trotting people in front of other people to hear the same talk again and again each year. Here's what the FAFSA is. Here's how one applies to colleges. A lot of things I think we could capture and better deliver.
Kim?
Yeah, I agree with what Ross is saying. That I think that would really help with people's very demanding schedules to help them be more informed. Dax, regarding your second bullet there on the conclusions, the one-to-one device model.
Yep.
Could you go back to the slide you had with the data that has parents and students? Okay, because I think that the parent preference is pretty different than the student preference.
Yep.
It looks to me like both it's hard to tell with where the bars end up, but it looks to me like probably about 85% of both high school students and middle school students would prefer a one-to-one model.
Correct.
And I wonder if part of the reason that this survey was done was to see how quickly we need to be on track to make that happen. I'm curious about how you're going to use this survey to inform our purchases.
I would say the intent of the survey was to start conversations about what the community wanted and what students wanted. The parent piece is, I think, a little bit difficult, right? The students in the classroom, I think, would be all happy to. Most of them would be happy to have a device. There's questions about, PD for teachers and what having every student having a device all the time would mean, and funding it. And there's a lot of questions that it brings up, and I would like to use the data to start discussions like this one that we're having tonight.
Was the teacher data informative on this point?
It is hard for me to remember that. We took this survey a long time, and I looked at the results a long time ago. But we can get back to you on that if you would like.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe in a Friday update or something like that. And also, did the parents identify as what grade level their student was at? Because
yes, they did. They did.
Because I think there might be real differences there between what the elementary parents preferred and what the what the secondary parents thought about the same issue.
Nevin?
Sure. So just in terms of like the one-to-one issue in terms of students versus parents, I think that it's important, and I know you're doing this, but it's important to keep the student's perspective in mind, just because like I know as someone who works with the computers that it's like really hard to do the if you're sharing with a computer with someone, it's like you're reaching like one hand in and the other person's like hands like on the other side, and you're like, all right, you press like the W, I'll press the Q.
Yep.
And so I think that when you have the one-to-one, it just makes a lot it makes interfacing and working with students a lot easier, just because you can communicate on things like G Suite, which we use, and it's just so easy to like sit next to people and have that verbal communication, but also put that on a piece of computer rather than doing research with someone. We're like, all right, I'm going to Google this and I'm going to Google that, and like I think it's really important to have one-to-one, and I think that enhances the capabilities of Albany students to achieve so much more.
Thank you.
Mahima and then Ross.
I think the one-to-one issue for me is less of about like a convenience and more of a equity thing, because it asks a question of, if we, technology is constantly developing and there's constantly innovations happening, and how can we best incorporate that into the classroom while making it an equitable sort of opportunity for everyone, So and it's very subjective how often teachers use the internet or require devices, and I think at the current capacity, like having a certain amount of Chrome carts and switching them and rotating them around is one thing, but like, sometimes teachers will be like, let's do a Kahoot, so everyone get out your phone, and you might, your phone might be dead, or you just don't have a phone, and I think like this year especially, a lot of students have been talking about how they didn't know they could just sign out a Chromebook to use all year long. And I think like we have a lot of opportunities at the district that we should advertise more, because in those case scenarios, like, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity. So, and also the back to school night thing, or that thing, I think sure videos could be cool for that, but I personally like for you parents to have the the hands-on experience of dealing with the hallways and the herds. But I do think for things like filling out the FAFSA and college, applications, I think that we only have how many counselors, and they're fantastic. But, maybe if like past students can do like video diaries or something, and then you guys can show them at your like presentations, like maybe that can help spread the information.
Hey, Ross and then Nevin.
I absolutely agree with Dax that this ought to be the start of conversations. Just this week, as a parent, I got the email notifying me that my daughter's math class is piloting the pouches to put phones in to get the disruptive phones off the kids' hands during class sessions. And if you asked me about the need for computers in school, I would probably come down on the side of, at certain times, they'd be hugely useful, and most of the time, keep the kids' hands off them. No phones, no disruption. You don't need a computer to talk about complex math. So I would love to have that discussion happen out among the teachers, among the students, negotiation with parents. And there are parents out there who, yes, we were very judicious with screen time for our kids. It's a great start to a lot of conversations.
Okay, Navin, and then Kim, and then I would like to get a comment in sideways.
Sure. Sorry, this is a really quick, small question. What do you do with the Chromebooks after the 3-year period is up? Like when you phase them out?
Okay, so we have started a program how do you Mahima refer to, where students, if they do not have a device, can borrow one for the year. So that was one of our initiatives to increase equity. There is still the piece of question about whether they have internet access when they take that device home, but that was kind of the first piece, so we started that. Our kind of what the district has committed to right now as far as funding Chromebooks is to be able to have enough Chromebooks to test one grade at a time for the state testing. That's kind of the number of those, and that's the number that we commit to refreshing every 3 years. The ones that come out may still have some life left in them. We do not feel comfortable testing with them because those need to run smooth, but those can go back into the classroom, and we use them in many cases. They've gone back into libraries. They go into many different classrooms to be used by students still.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Kim.
I also received the email saying my son is in a class where they all are required to put their phones into the little pouch and lock it during class. I spoke to one of the teachers that's piloting that, and I asked how it was going. I hope this board gets a chance to hear how this pilot program goes. And she said that it's not going perfectly. She said, I didn't realize how often I'm asking the kids to take out their phones and use them in class, because we don't have enough Chromebooks, and they're not necessarily in the classes. And so I think this is definitely food for further conversation. I will say that the Wellness Committee, of which I'm a member, had a survey done at the middle school and at the high school. And because it was impossible for the kids to all enter on a Google form, that all of those kids, so over 2,000 kids, did a paper survey. And it has been my responsibility to enter each one of those paper surveys into the Google form, which is a lot of work. I'm getting some help from some high school students on that. But it would have been so easy to use technology for that, but we simply did not have the resources.
Interesting. Okay, so nobody else has commented on this, so I'm going to throw this out there. We often talk about communications and how best to communicate, and I thought it was very interesting here that both in teacher and district communication, email was by far the preference, and the school portal and website were both very low on the list. And I don't know if that's a reflection on the quality of the portal and the website, or if it's just personal preference that people just want to be talked to directly through an email, catches their attention. But I think that's interesting, especially since we do spend a lot of time and money on both the website and the portal. If they're not effectively communicating with people, we might want to rethink that.
I also found that slightly surprising. Yeah.
I would like to add one small piece. I think that the survey was done before the revamping of our website, and I would like to suggest that maybe the fact that the website doesn't get much response is that there hasn't been enough exposure yet to the new website, because I think it's much more user-friendly now, and it's been revamped, and I'm getting some positive feedback.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if there was a difference. Well, okay, if we thank you very much, Dax. That was very informative. We can move on. We are still running a half an hour, or actually quite a bit more than that behind, but the superintendent tells me we can table the English Learner Program update and bring that back at a later board meeting if the board is okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so we'll take that as tabled.
We'll probably have to bring it back in May.
And that brings us to a review and discussion of Albany High School higher education enrollment trends.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Marie Williams, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Ms. Williams.
Good evening, Superintendent Williams, Board President Black, board members, members of the community. On the day that I was appointed as the director then of Educational and Student Support Services, there was a conversation about tracking what happens to students after they graduate from high school. I remember that very clearly. And so it's only taken a year and a half for that information to come to you this evening. I'm really happy to be joined by Albany High School counselor Becca Burns and also the proud principal of Albany High School, Alexia Ritchie. They're going to help with this presentation. And so our hope this evening is to sort of break this presentation into 3 parts. We gave you in the board backup some data slides that we received from National Student Clearinghouse. So I'm gonna provide just a brief overview of those slides in the interest of time. And then our counselor is gonna talk about current strategies in place at the high school to support students in thinking about post-secondary planning. And then Ms. Ritchie is gonna talk about ways to use this information in moving forward to think about targeting initiatives and ideas to support all kids at Albany High School. Because by the time we are reviewing this data, students have graduated and are gone and are beyond our reach. And so we want to not only observe this data because it's really interesting and is useful to us, but ultimately have an impact on kids that are currently attending the high school. So with that, okie doke. So National Student Clearinghouse is a nonprofit organization that provides education verification. My understanding from talking with Ms. Burns is that in the past we have used used the Clearinghouse and that we moved away from it, and that this year, because we use Naviance as a college planning tool at the high school, and because they have an arrangement with the Clearinghouse, it was possible to use Naviance to upload some of the information and get some information about what happens to Albany High School graduates. I do want to correct one error I made in answering a question to the board yesterday. And that was a question from board member Trutain about what information we provide to the Clearinghouse that allows them to monitor kids over a period of time. And so through my looking at the Clearinghouse, it indicated that we upload social security numbers, but today I got clarification from our technology support services person, Mr. Haller, that we don't provide social security numbers, but we do provide all of the other things. So first name, last name, middle name, we provide the graduation date and also the date of birth. And so that is how the Clearinghouse is able to track students over a period of time. So I wanted to clarify that for you. Next slide. So we got maybe about 100 pages worth of slides. And we try to be really judicious with the information that we shared with you today. But certainly, if anybody has an interest in looking at more of the slides, I can make them available to you. And so essentially, the information that comes back to us is divided into categories. And I've provided 3 of them for us to look at this evening. Go back. Go back, please. The first set of slides is around enrollment in the first fall, immediately following high school graduation. The second set we're going to just briefly look at would be enrollment within the first 2 years following high school graduation. The third set of slides would have to do with students who attended at any time in the first year and then went on to a second year, and that's college persistence. And then the last set of slides has to do with looking at students achieving degrees within a 6-year period, and then there are some other data sets there. So the information is provided to us by gender, by ethnicity. It's provided by 2-year versus 4-year, and so those are the slides that we're providing. They also gave us information that was disaggregated by public university, private university, and also in-state, out-of-state. But again, not wanting to overwhelm us with information, I tried to select what I thought would sort of at least start that conversation. Okay. So the first, this slide here shows college enrollment during the first fall. So as students graduate in June, in the fall, what percentage or rate of students are enrolling in college. And so this shows that information by gender. And with the exception of 2010-11, Across the other years, the rate of enrollment was higher for female students than for male students. There was a question about 2015, where there appears to be a much higher rate of female enrollment than male enrollment when you look at the other years. And just in the amount of time I had to ponder this question, I went back and looked at the cohort size, and the cohort size that year for female students was much smaller graduating, right? It was like a 40 student difference, which is not typical across all of the other years. Next slide. The next two slides show the information reported, that same information reported by ethnicity, and so the 2 or more races is because prior to 2012 we didn't use that as a subgroup to report, so it's not that there were none, it's that we didn't report them in that way. It was not reported in that way, the information. And so what you see is that sort of there's some shifting from year to year, but in general, sort of when you take a bit of a step back from the data and look at the next slide, in general, the enrollment rates in the fall are higher for white and Asian students than for Hispanic and African American students. And so this is just showing the N size, showing the actual number of students, and then also showing the actual percentages, because some of the trend lines were difficult to sort of decipher without some numbers to attach. Then this slide having to do with students enrolling in the fall immediately after high school is broken out by 2-year versus 4-year. So then the next set of slides is enrollment anytime within the first 2 years after high school. And so a couple interesting things to note. The gender slide is about the same. If you go to the next slide, what is interesting to note here is that, and this isn't a scientific observation, this is just me sort of pulling my eyes back from the screen, that those lines bunch up a little bit more, right? So there's less variance. There appears to be less variance, with the exception of the dip in 2014 for Black or African American students. Next slide. Next slide. And so this slide is interesting because it is telling us that the numbers of students anytime within the first 2 years, the enrollment at 2-year institutions is higher than the enrollment compared to the first fall is higher at 2-year than it is at 4-year institutions. So what I did was I took this slide and the slide for the first fall and just said, was it more or was it less and by what amount? And it looks like there were more students finding an entry point through the 2-year institution within that first 2 years. So these slides are having to do with students who return for a second year. And so again, the gender slides are, for the most part, don't show as much variance. And again, you've got a dip there in 2013 for African American students, but the variance across the years is not as much. Next slide, please. And then this one was really interesting. It highlights the percentages of students at the 2-year and at the 4-year that are returning. And so there's with both the 2-year and the 4-year, there's a high level of college persistence, which I think is a good thing. So the next set of slides identify and show us the rates of students who completed a degree within 6 years. And for the purposes of this reporting, they don't separate out what kind of degree. Was it an AA? Was it a BA? Was it a BS? So it's just who completed their program. And so here we see there's a slightly higher trend towards females completing within 6 years. Next slides show, so this slide shows a far more pronounced disparity between degree completion rates for Asian students and white students as compared to their Hispanic, Latino, and Black or African American counterparts. A great variance there. And then the next slide Next slide. And so then the next slide is 2-year versus 4-year. And so this one is interesting because in this slide, what you see is that there's a really sharp decrease. You were looking at the 40s and 50s, and then who returned, those rates were much higher at the 2-year institutions. And so here you see there's a really low rate of completion. I'm not sure if that's because they were enrolled in programs for which there was no endpoint, or if they discontinued attending a 2-year institution.
In that case, if they attended a 2-year institution for 2 years and transferred to a 4-year institution, where would that show up on that graph?
That's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to, but I can find out.
So they're transferring without, say, an AA, they're just going
Right.
straight to a UC with credits.
This slide shows the number of years that it's taking students to graduate, both in 2010 and 11. We don't have any more recent data because students haven't been in school for 6 years for any years after these two. The next slide, please. Okay, so this one is interesting. So this is the most common institutions of enrollment in the fall immediately following high school graduation for all classes. So it's for all of the students by number of students. And so presumably there's a whole long list of colleges that are not reported here, right? This just shows the most common institutions. And I thought it was an interesting observation that the two most common institutions that students attend in the fall immediately following high school graduation are Berkeley City College and Diablo Valley College, both community colleges. I thought that was an interesting observation. And when you draw the line at the sort of the top 10, there are 4 community colleges in there, 4 UCs in there, and 2 schools that are associated with the CSU system. So I just thought that was interesting to note, and a much higher number at Berkeley City College, at 235, versus the next highest, which is 147. So, so I thought that was interesting. Okay, so then the next series of slides, and I won't go over each one of them, just show the percentages of students. So you see the first year, there's a lot of green, they're new to college, and so then the orange is how many kept going. The red is, I think that's red, how many graduated. The one I think is interesting to note here is the not in the clearinghouse to date, and that number is, that rate percentage is decreasing. So it's 15% of students that were not, presumably maybe not enrolled in a college because they didn't pop up in the clearinghouse, but then that number, that percentage decreases to 12.3%, and then to 11.3%, and then to 10%, and then 9%, and then 8%, and then 7%. So I think that's an interesting observation to make also, that even within a span of 6 years, students are finding their way back to either a 2-year or a 4-year college because they're showing up in the clearinghouse. So there are a few slides that deal with this with a different start date, so I'm not going to go through all of those, but if you would flip through those. So then this starts at 2011 and 12. The next slide starts the next year at 12, 13. So now I want to invite Becca Burns, counselor at the high school, to come and talk about strategies that they're currently employing. I did attach as an appendix a series of surveys and communications that go out to families, but thank you, Becca, for coming and talking about those.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. It's a bit past my bedtime, so I apologize for any brain failures here. So I wanted to thank Ms. Williams for putting this presentation together and gathering this data. She had mentioned that we tried the Clearinghouse a few years ago and went away from it and came back to it. We went away from it because it returned 0 data. I think they had found 2 of our students or something like that. So the technology was not working for us yet. And now that it is, it's really tremendous, especially to compare to the data that we have been gathering just anecdotally all these years, which I think that's how a lot of schools do it. And I'll talk about how we gather that data in a second, but just what was heartening to me was that the data that we have been gathering on college-going trends, which we do through the senior exit survey I'll talk about in a second, lines up pretty nicely, not with the first-year data necessarily of college-going behavior with students, but pretty nicely with the second-year data. So students, when they're stating their plans as they leave high school, they do seem to be getting around to those plans with a margin of error of about 10% versus 30%. And we've always wondered that, and we've never had a way to corroborate it necessarily. I also just want to comment really quickly on that list of colleges, the top 25 colleges. One of the uses I'll talk about that we track this data for is to help give students guidance on what college options make sense to them. And we have, for the last at least 6 years, really been cautioning families about the UC system and the capriciousness of their admissions. And I think, Mahima, you can probably speak to this about just the feeling among your class. It sounds like UC admissions this year are following the same trend line we've seen, where it feels pretty brutal. We know our students are prepared, and the admissions trends are. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Microphone.
And I think that everyone is very deserving, and if the UCs don't see it, then that's their loss.
I think so as well. I agree. But it breaks my heart, because I know that our classes year after year are really well prepared, and the admissions trends wobble greatly, and we have some data on that, which I can share if you'd like. We put it in our presentations for parents. But just to get to the surveys in the interest of time, so the counseling department has 3 surveys that we have used, are continuing to use, and have just started using. The senior exit survey, which I inherited from my predecessor who did this job for 30 years, I think, probably mirrors what is used in many schools. We give this to students in econ classes using Naviance on Chromebooks. Used to be a paper survey, and it asks 8 basic questions about what are your plans for next year, and also a few questions about specific scholarships and awards that they've won, so that we can plan our awards day around this information that they have gathered. We implement this survey right after May 1st, which is when students have to make their commitments to four-year colleges. It's been real shaky the last few years, trying to balance the disappointment that students are going through, the sort of not wanting to share this data. Since we are using Naviance to process college applications, a lot of the information about where they applied is already in there, and having to go back in and say, yes, I didn't get in here, I didn't get in here, and celebrate the ones that we did, and acknowledging that many students didn't apply to four-year colleges and that that's not in their plans at all. So it's a tricky balance that we try to just acknowledge sort of the difficulties therein. Two of the important questions on here that are sort of lesser questions, but they're important to us. One is about any A through G requirements that they may have completed outside of Albany High, because we don't have a great way to track that now. And the other one is about the post-graduation email address. How can we get in touch with you after high school ends? We put this survey together based partly on what we inherited and partly on what we know other schools are using and partly on our own needs, just trying to get this information before we lose you guys. The second survey, if you can go to the next. Oh, I could probably do that. Thank you. This is a post-graduation survey that I put together using survey information that I was getting out of Naviance from other schools when we saw originally that the Clearinghouse wasn't getting us what we needed. And I sort of took it upon myself to send this out to classes after a year out from graduation. So using those email addresses that we had gathered in the exit survey, sending an email back out, we miss you guys, tell us how you're doing. And that's a real hit and miss return rate, but the returns that we did get are pretty nice qualitative data, not as quantitative. Not a huge return rate, but the information that we do get back we find really super useful for just the guidance that we give students. Students, as you mentioned, board member Stapleton Gray, get tired of us saying the same speech over and over again. Not tired, that's not what you said. But hearing advice from their peers is really valuable. So we're trying to capture actual quotes from peers of what do I wish I had known. We do that at senior year. What do you wish you had known as a freshman? Now that you're out in the world, what do you wish you had known? What could you tell yourself? And a lot of the answers are, there's nothing I could have told myself when I was 14 that would have shaken me. You know, I had to go through it. But by and large, the academic and sort of life skill preparedness questions, students rated themselves really highly prepared on, said that their teachers did a great job, that the information was there for them if they accessed it in terms of guidance. So we felt good about that. We discontinued it just because we were kind of doing it for our own interest, and we couldn't find a buyer, and it's a lot of work. But we can always start that back up. And then the third survey, which we just started this year, is a survey that we sent out to our 9th grade parents. The counseling office did at the outset of our 9th grade conference season, which is the entire month of March this year. So in the past, we've had a couple weeks and even just a couple days where we've offered conferences. This year, we opened it up for the entire month of March to try to get as many 9th graders and their families in to talk about four-year planning. I'm going to do my spiel because I've given it 60 times now. Graduation and A through G requirements, college testing requirements, extracurricular activities, community college options both in and after high school. And this was a way that we thought we could cull data to try to pull out the students that we know will need more support throughout in a variety of ways. And you can see the areas of support that we asked parents to indicate. So we offered this as an optional survey. Fill this out if you want. Here's how we're going to use it. We got back about 75 surveys out of the 290-something freshmen that we have. I've found them incredibly valuable. I've learned things that I never would have learned about students if I had just had to rely on my own contact with them. And I think it's improved our early relationship with parents as well. Just even the outreach, even if they didn't take advantage of it. So we're hoping to use this to inform our College Basics program, which is a group of students that we want to provide extra intensive college preparation for in terms of guidance services. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before we start questions, can I ask the board to extend the meeting by half an hour?
I move that we extend by half an hour.
Okay. Then let's move on with this. I've got just a brief comment, and then we can move on. The piece of data that I haven't really been able to sort out from this, I know that often students are counseled to start at a community college because if you go in the right program and do well, you can automatically get into a CSU or a UC. I've also read that nationwide, the number of students who go to two-year schools and complete a four-year degree is very low. And I'd be very interested to know how our students do in that regard.
Yeah, and I maybe can only answer anecdotally now, but I'm in the middle of helping students transfer, which really is outside our domain, but students who are applying to non-UC and CSU schools out of community college do still need a high school transcript. And it's pretty neat to see some kids who really would have probably struggled straight out for a variety of reasons, probably less academic than other reasons, who are now applying all over the country and have a really great shot at it. And that's completely anecdotal, I realize, but I think our students are particularly well positioned. And we do try to incorporate that into our message that you really need to, in fact, we have a handout, you really need to advocate for yourself at the community college level. You need to be asking which classes are transferable. It's not going to happen automatically. So we're aware of that.
Thank you. Alexia?
Just a quick fun fact right out of Berkeley High. I started at a two-year community college, College of Alameda, transferred to UC Berkeley, and ended up here. So what we do with this information is we use it for a lot of the goal-driven documents that we write at our site. Those include our site plan. They can include the WASC plan, which is coming up next year. It helps us guide our master schedule a bit. You know, what this data gives us from the Clearinghouse, of course, is a lot of very good college-driven data. So where do you go with a two-year and a four-year degree? What you do with that degree, though, is not indicated in this particular data point. Of course, what you do after you get the degree is hard to track, but what we do know is what we need to get started with in the schools, and that's usually driven by the Common Core state standards, which of course also include college and career readiness. And so the idea that we're getting students ready for college is one half of the puzzle. How are we doing with getting kids ready for their career is certainly another piece of what we're responsible for. That includes social emotional competencies such as perseverance, developing empathy, the ability to work collaboratively. I think coordinator of alternative ed, Darren McNally, is looking at some data points that we can grasp from social emotional competencies. I'd be really interested to couple that with this information. But what this data does tell us, again, is how well we're preparing our students for the world of college and how to get in and how to sustain themselves through to a degree program. Some questions to consider, of course, is our enrollment in our AP coursework. Our EAP, which is the Early Assessment Program. We have all of our 11th grade students taking an EAP assessment in English Language Arts and Math. We have very good feedback from there in terms of how ready they are academically to prepare themselves for academic coursework in English and Math. And then we are looking at the graduation requirements. Of course, that's tied a little bit to our master's schedule. There are some districts that require A through G coursework to be completed before you get your high school diploma. Albany does not require A through G. But again, that's just a question to ask ourselves as we're looking at the readiness and the stability of our students for college work. And again, the Clearinghouse just gives us that information.
Thanks. Questions from the board? Charlie?
So, Marie, it wasn't just a year or so ago that the part that you remember was the board asking for this kind of information. Thank you so much for all the work that you did and others did in bringing this information to us. I think we've actually been looking for this for about 10 years, as far as I can remember.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, every year somebody is expressing a desire for this kind of information, so kudos on producing it. Thank you.
So we hope to see it every year.
Yeah. I'm glad it worked out with Naviance because this is really very useful information. My quick question, I think, was I noticed on the exit survey that you do actually have a question about if you've taken classes that would help satisfy A to G requirements outside of Albany High. And it sounds like that might be a source of data for us to mine a little bit further. I've been surprised when we see on our official statistics that 60% of the students meet the A to G requirements. It seems low to me. And so having this extra piece of information would help us solidify that number just a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to lobby for something that I mentioned many times before, and with our Director of Alternative Education here, I know that he's heard me say this before. A fairly large percentage of the students who graduate without satisfying the A through G requirements have taken all the classes, but have gotten Ds in one or more of them. And some kind of grade recovery system, maybe something similar to what they're doing at the middle school, maybe something different, but some way for them to raise those grades to better than a D before they graduate would help them get into college and would make me feel better that we were giving them the education we were supposed to be giving them. I don't know that it has to be mandatory, but I think it should be an opportunity for any student who wants to take it. That's just my own little editorializing. Do we have other questions or comments here? Ross?
Yeah, just a thought in terms of wondering how well we handle the handoff of you're here in our school, now you're going out to the real world. I would guess that and Mahima, you may be able to corroborate this, I would guess that every student at the school has their own email account somewhere else outside of the school because the school's a sandbox. You can't get email from someone who isn't a teacher or other student. And if we're not capturing that because we're not incenting them to use it or report it or provide it to us, then we're losing them the minute we try to reach them by their school mail and they're gone. My daughter's high school, where they didn't restrict what you could get at your email, so you were getting your email, you're getting lots of things at your school email, had a 6-month or so transitionary period before they turned off your email account. We might want to look at how to essentially enroll the kids so that we know how to find them through whatever means they're going to prefer once they've gone off.
I bet the Alumni Association knows.
Well, and colleges do that. You know, you can get alumni accounts at colleges because the colleges say, now I can reach you to send you development email. You know, we're not going to be hitting up our kids to fund the, you know, the career tech ed or something.
Why not?
We might. But figuring ways to make it to their benefit, to tell us how to reach them in the future is something we could think about.
Kim?
Becca, you said that, you know, after a span of years, no, it was Marie, okay. After a span of years, it looked like many of our students were sort of finding a way into a degree program and achieving a degree. And Mahima, you mentioned, and I've heard from other 12th graders about the very, anecdotally, it seems like a very low acceptance rate from the UCs. When you talked about the follow-on survey that came a year later, it made me think about sort of looping those things together and trying to see if there is a way that we could get information to our students when they're applying to college about what has worked for their peers just a few years ago. Because even though it seems like the AHS students have their counselors saying there are many routes to success. There are, you know, you don't have to go to an Ivy League. You don't have to go to an extremely selective school in state. You can be successful, all these other routes. It seems like the students are not really crediting that advice a lot of the time, and that maybe if we could find a way to get them, you know, peer examples that might help break down this perception that they have to put themselves under such extreme pressure. It's just an idea.
Mahima?
You know, I've always advocated for, I guess, upperclassmen who leave and then, you know, having that sort of connection between two people because, you know, now as I'm going to college and all of this stuff, so one of the first things I've already started doing is looking into the programs I want to be a part of and then looking at what their alumni are doing and having, you know, a portfolio or like even a short blurb that says, okay, so Julie graduated and this year, and these are the things she did at Albany High. These are some of her favorite classes, and now she goes here. She actually didn't go to a 4-year college. She took a gap year, and she found that really interesting. And this is Julie's email, and she's open to you, you know, reaching out to her for advice on, you know, how a gap year could be beneficial for you. And I think that at our school especially, there's so much pressure to go to a UC or go to a 4-year. And I think, you know, having, you know, examples, even 1 or 2 in each sort of, you know, option for after high school, whether it's work, whether it's a gap year, whether it's a 2-year, I think it can be really, you know, inspiring and give students a lot of direction, whether they're a freshman or a sophomore or a junior, like having, you know, having a sort of example or like a role model, like someone who's done it, this is the kind of thing I might want to do, and this is how they did it. So, yeah.
Can I comment on a resource that I think we have in our community? I was recently at an event where we awarded scholarships to students, and for the most part, this was the first generation of people in their family going to college. And we don't necessarily have that in Albany, and so I think a really rich source of what to do well after Albany High School would be siblings that do start to mentor and start to collaborate with younger siblings in terms of what a positive direction looks like for an Albany graduate. I have many anecdotal instances of how that made an impact within a family, within an Albany family.
Do you have ideas about how to arrange that, how to organize it?
I will certainly think about that.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Ross?
Just one anecdotal data point about the UCs, especially maybe as after this mishap they had last year or so with Irvine, where they did an over-admit, and then I think they're using their wait list. I have known of students who had very stellar grades and scores who were waitlisted at schools you would not have expected, and I think it's in part because they may be betting they're not going to go. So if you are waitlisted at a school, you do want to, you're waitlisted at Davis and are a stellar student, Davis is probably betting you're going to go to Harvard instead. So if you want to go to Davis, write that letter, and that's the sort of multi-step process they throw in there because they can. If you never respond to being put on the wait list, they know you're going elsewhere.
Sure. And within the last 4 or 5 years, maybe, Becca, you can confirm this, the TAG, the Transfer Agreement Program between the UCs and many of the community colleges around here really does guarantee that you're going to have a space ready for you at UC Davis. And I think there's one other UC campus that uses the TAG program. Oh, my goodness. So utilizing that, and I think that's just perhaps in the last 4 or 5 years, you'll probably see an uptick in the number of students who are eligible and who do transfer to a UC.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Comments or questions, audience?
Probably worth mentioning that, so this is the high stress season, right? And we'll talk about stress sort of regularly on the school board, and reducing student stress, because I can see it and can feel it out there, ought to be a huge part of what we figure out how to do.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
I'm glad you brought that up, and it was great to hear the special ed conversation around that as well. I think when we talk about realigning our graduation requirements or just the push in general to college, we have to be really conscious of the give and take of what that costs students. And so it's, again, just like going in for the exit survey where we have to have a balance between some of you are really excited and some of you totally aren't. Even at 9th grade, let's give you your A through G requirements here so you know what they are. These are community college options so you know what they are. This is a long time off. Please don't stress out about it. Let me know if mental health stuff comes up in between, because that's probably the biggest thing we see in our office that's standing in the way. It's not the academic piece, it's the other factors. So we are very conscious of that.
Okay, thank you. Well, good. Thank you very much for coming and giving us that report. Okay. We're on to review and action items. And the first one is a master contract between Albany Unified School District and Staff Rehab.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, again, this is a contract with Staff Rehab, and Diane Marie is here to answer any questions about this contract, should you have any.
Do we have any questions? All right, do we have a motion? We need a motion to approve the master contract between Albany Unified School District and Staff Rehab.
I guess I'm a little bit confused. We received 2 contracts as confidential.
One was...
This is only one of them.
Yeah, one of them was in the consent.
Okay, yes. I move that we accept this master contract with Staff Rehab.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good. That brings us to professional services agreement with the McLean Hospital Corporation.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, Darren McNally is here along with Carrie Neerheim to share information on the professional services agreement with McLean Hospital Corporation. And I know there are several board questions that were asked, and hopefully if there are any that you'd like to either ask again or have more clarification, Darren and Carrie are here to answer those questions. Ms. Neerheim.
Thank you again. I am very excited to be able to present this with Darren this evening. I've heard a definite through line throughout this meeting about mental health and about stresses on our students. And so I think that this is coming at a very opportune time. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren so he can explain what this program is.
Great, thank you. And I realize I'm the last agenda item, so I'll try to be concise. What this is an agreement with the Pear Institute specifically, and they focus on assisting schools and after-school programs with social-emotional development. They use the term SED instead of SEL for most of their work, and assessing areas of strengths and needs for students in those programs in order to help those schools then target interventions and supports for those students. what this contract is for in the limited sense, and what we're hoping to do by the end of this school year, is pilot their primary assessment tool, which is called the Holistic Student Assessment, the HSA, with one grade level at Albany High, almost certainly 10th graders, and McGregor students. And then take that data and then, with the assistance of the Parent Institute, start to disaggregate it, look for trends in that data, associate it with some of the information that we're starting to collect now, such as primarily academic outcomes. We'd like to see if there's any through lines as far as certain social emotional indicators and student success or lack of success, and also other factors such as attendance, and essentially pilot this and find out if this would be a useful tool for us. And then if it is, look at other ways to implement this on a more regular basis at AHS, McGregor, and possibly throughout the rest of the district. The HSA is a 61-question survey that is strength-based. So it asks questions such as, I have adults in my life that I admire, to assess the strengths of a student's adult relationships. There's another question such as, let's see, I often act quickly and I get in trouble because of it, to assess a student's sense of emotional control. There's another question that is, I try to help other people with their problems, to assess student empathy. And they then take this data and then look at it against their bigger database size, so that we can get normalized scores that would assess kind of how this student compares with their peers as far as strengths and needs. And then we're hoping to then develop kind of more robust ways of planning intervention based on that data. And at this point, it's just a pilot. We're just hoping to see if we can get some usable information out of this, and if it feels usable, then look at ways to deploy it in a broader sense.
Okay, so when you say it's a pilot, I just need to understand, are you saying you will take this pilot population and take the test results and actually try to plan interventions for them? Or are you just saying you're going to look at what you already know about these students and see if it's consonant with what the results are you get from the test?
More of the latter. We're more curious if this can give us new information.
But what would you do if you thought it was new information? First time around, what would you do with that new information?
So then we would take that information and try to plan interventions for those students. I'm not sure what we'll be able to accomplish by the end of this school year. I think what we're more curious about right now is a way to systematically identify students before they start having academic or crisis level emotional problems, or the students who actually don't often get recognized ahead of time until they start having really severe academic difficulties. So we probably would not start to, and we also would not plan interventions solely based on this data. Part of what we want to do with it is compare it with the other information that we have, but we don't at this point have any individualized social emotional information. We have proxies for social emotional indicators that we use, but we don't have anything that really kind of gets at the core of what's a student's subjective experience like, and how does that affect their outcomes at school.
Okay,
We're hoping to access that information.
I'm very much in favor of some way to get the personalized social emotional information about the students. I'm a little bit worried, I'd say a little more than a little bit worried about this specific test, just because of what the Parent Institute has told us about it. It seems like they've had a very small sample size up till now. They hadn't had a large enough sample to normalize it for any population other than the average Massachusetts kid. They can't disaggregate their data by or normalize it by ethnicity or other background.
Was the technical report forwarded to the board? Val, did that get sent along?
The article that they cite?
The 2017 technical report. I sent it to Val last night, so I don't know if it was sent along.
I'm not sure. I mean, the one that they published?
No, not the specific article from 2012. This is a report that was. They had several psychometricians outside of the Parent Institute independently look at.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
I haven't gone to all of my
Would you like
emails
my
you sent
copy?
last night, so you haven't? Okay.
The short, and we can provide it for you, and the short version is that their current sample size is up to, I believe, 43,000 students with 63,000 administrations, and they've had individuals outside of the Parent Institute establish both the reliability and validity of the measure, and have also specifically looked at questions of differences based on ethnicity, language, special education, and those sort of things. So that's all in the technical report.
Okay, well, that would definitely make a difference to me.
Yeah, and they have, the Parent Institute's done a lot of work to establish those measures themselves.
Okay, that's good. You know, if it's a valid test, then it's fine. I mean, I'm harking back when I was in school, which was a very long time ago. Every kid was given an IQ test, and their educational program was based on the results of that IQ test. And I don't think there's any reputable public school that would do that today. So, you know,
correct.
This kind of sounds a little bit like that. I'd really want to be convinced that this was a valid test and that we weren't just believing whatever they said. We had the students earlier saying, "Oh yeah, well, everybody lies on the,
California Healthy Kids Survey."
California Healthy Kids Survey," and they would do the same on this, I'm sure. And the institute itself says we recommend against giving the results to parents because if the students know the parents will see the results, they're more likely to lie.
Well,
and I can't imagine Albany parents being okay with not seeing the results.
Yeah, and we will provide in the passive consent instructions on how parents can access that information. The one reason that we're looking at this in addition to the California Healthy Kids Survey is the nature of the questions. The California Healthy Kids Survey asked very specific, objective questions about certain things students have done, and there's a variety of reasons students wouldn't provide truthful information to those questions, whereas this is much more strength-based. And we're not just looking, to your previous question, we're not looking for ways to sort students. We're looking for ways to try to support students. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I think it's good to not necessarily just automatically disclose the information, is because we don't want students to feel like something's going to happen to them because of their answers.
Something is, though. It
could.
They might be given an intervention that to them might be stigmatizing. So, just a concern.
Yeah, and that's also a reason why I'm not going to say, like, if they score in this range on this item, this is what we're going to do to them. We're trying to assemble a lot more information about what's going on with our students in a lot of ways. And, as an example, one thing that we might discover, and this has been a common issue at other schools, is some students might score low in the area of feeling like they belonging at school. And that would actually match a lot of the more subjective observations we've had. One thing we can do as a quote-unquote intervention is really ask all teachers to really have a way of making contact with all students. And so in that way, we've provided an intervention based on the data. Saying that we'll look at interventions related to this information doesn't necessarily mean we'll be pulling students out, referring students for special education, or anything like that. And also, we're hoping to also find some data that will be things we can celebrate in our students as well. And we're looking to maybe also find some ways that there are certain social emotional traits that really make students incredibly resilient, and ways that we can also reinforce those traits in students as well.
Okay, so I'm sorry I've monopolized the conversation. Others, board members want to comment?
I think my only comment is this seems like a very modest effort, and I don't see any reason not to just go ahead and give it a try. It sounds like you'll get something out of it.
Okay, that sounded a lot like a motion. Was that a motion?
So that's a motion then. Okay, I'll move that we approve the contract.
Okay, Al, you wanted to say something?
I did. In my conversations with Darren, what I gathered from this is that this data will also spark conversation amongst staff. And as we've been working on with our leadership team, social, emotional, and social justice competencies. And so this is going to align really well with trying to find some data, at least in this pilot program, for our administration, our staff to start talking about not necessarily specific interventions for kids, but to really look at some more, stepping back and looking at more global ways that we can create conditions for learning and teaching resiliency that I think that maybe our students are struggling with.
Great. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. I just want to comment. I'm going to vote in favor. I just want you to know that it's more in faith of you than of the evaluation itself. I trust that you will look at it with wisdom and understanding and really decide whether it's valuable rather than just take it on its face.
Would the board like the technical, once I find his email, like the technical manual?
Yeah,
I can send it to everyone.
I do want to see that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to agenda items, matters introduced by the board.
There were no mentioned, but there was, I think it was Kim Trutain one board member wanted to add something as a matter introduced by the board for a future agendized item.
No, Jacob definitely had an item that he wanted
Jacob,
to.
I couldn't remember. I know somebody did have a matter that they wanted to bring.
That staff was directed to investigate whether it would be a public item or a closed session item, but it certainly needs to be
$15 on
the minimum wage.
Yes.
Unless she had something different, but
Yeah, I think that Ross and I both wanted to see the ranked choice voting
Brought back as an agenda item
brought back.
for discussion. Okay. Good. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.